Bing bong. We did it. We did it. We did it. We're here. Oh man, I miss not having my guitar, dude. I gotta tell you, this weekend I really felt it. I really felt it. So I find my strings are coming. They're coming. They're supposed to be here tomorrow. We'll see if that materializes in any meaningful way. I literally have people like requesting me to play songs and play things, and one of my Patreons is talking about starting his own podcast and all this. He's asking to use some of my music for that, which that's very humbling and very wonderful, honestly. I think one of the great things about doing this is I feel like it does inspire other people to pursue the thing that they have always wanted to pursue, whether that be their own art or their own music or anything. Mach Deutschland van Fraschimus frei. Bud, you're first in today. Look at you. Chomping at the bit, eh? You've been wanting to say this for all weekend, I bet. You call them demons. The state of Missouri is trying to pass a Senate Bill 666, which would legalize lynching. Like, it's gotten so fucking ridiculous, eh? Like, the book burning to begin with was already very, like, fascist in the first place. Like, not a good look, burning books. Like, not a good look. Especially when those books include, like, Maus, which is straight up a retelling of fascist Germany. Just using, like, cats and mice. Like, yo, how's capitalism been treating me? He's shitty, dude. Just like everybody else. Just like everybody else. I'm a bit fortunate because I feel as though I have minimized my contact to it to the degree. So I'm very privileged, and I am aware of my privilege in this regard. I hope I never lose it. I constantly tell the chat, please, God, like, never let me go off into La La Land where I forget how shitty capitalism actually is. Like, but I feel as though like I feel like I'm on the crest. Like I feel like I'm just on the, like, cliff's edge of just, like, being able to commit most of my time not to participating in capital, but struggling against capital. I really would love to live in a world where I'm not defined by the existence of this system. But if I have to choose between participating in the system or struggling against the system, I'm happy that my life has manifested in such a way so that I am one of the people who get to struggle against it. I don't think most people are in that position. And so I'm very, very, very pleased to be able to do that. And that my time is spent finding a way to just, I know it's been beating you down, pissed off, but I know. Like, it's the absurdities of, like, if you, like, I'm completely of the opinion that if you fall down, right, if you fall over, like, we should let you chill out. And honestly, like even if you fall over, fuck that even. Like, why are we working ourselves to death like this? Like, why are we spending so much time grinding away for a subsistence? For just, like, even a base subsistence, which now it's no longer even on the table. Like, now it's just straight up like, nah, you don't even get, like, an apartment. Like, you don't even, like, the wage no longer pays the rent. And it's getting overt. It's getting obvious. Hey, Matthias. Hey, Propaganda. How you doing, bud? And, like, yesterday it was like I finally, like, I don't get very many days off. This is the down season for the type of capitalist work that I engage in, the cafe work and all of that. So January, February. So I'm getting, like, one day off a week right now. And I really have to commit myself to like, no, I'm disconnecting. I'm not going to look at the news. I'm not paying any attention to any of that. I'm going to commit to literally anything else. Like literally anything else. And no guilt, no shame, whatever it is. Like I don't play video games all day, right? Like go look at the sky. Go. I genuinely don't care. Like think of the thing that is supposed to be the most degrading, shitty thing that all the capitalists are like, how dare you do that? Right? Do that. If you have a day off, no shame, no guilt, no nothing. These capitalists are losers. Everything they're telling you is wrong. Right? That our culture is completely inverted in its worldview. And honestly, who cares what these people think? Like, I really am getting to a point now where I'm just like, who gives a shit what these people think at all? Here in Canada, like, and we're going to go into trucker convoy stuff because there seems to be the only thing worth talking about these days. Literally, you've got like a right wing that's saying, let's enslave the populace. We're protesting for slavery. Let's everyone get back to wage slavery, and that's called freedom, right? That's my favorite part, right? My absolute favorite part about the right wing is that they literally call wage slavery freedom. Like, we need to reopen the economy so that people can get back to work, but the system is a wage slave system. This is called freedom. Like, and that's 30% of the populace that thinks that way. And then you have another 30% of the populace, this is the liberals, who are walking around saying, things are a bit dangerous right now, so maybe we need to protect wage slaves until the problem clears up, and then we can put the wage slaves back to work, right? And then you've got another like 20% of the society, that's the NDP, who are saying, like, we should have more robust support systems for now until the pandemic clears, and then we'll put the wage slaves back to work, right? So here we've got a full 80% of the society being like, wage slavery is fine. Wage slavery is definitely the way to go. We're just debating as to the degree that we should enslave people and send them into this shitty system, right? Like, that's the genuine debate that is actually occurring here in Canada. It isn't, is the wage slave system valid? It's, to what degree should we enslave the wage slaves? And if you're conservative, it's 100%. If you're liberal, it's like 50-50, and if you're NDP, it's like slightly less than that. But and once this pandemic is lifted, like once the pandemic is over, once the political class decides to put everybody back to work, they'll just remove the support systems and dump everybody out into the deep end. You can see that down in the United States. You can see the effect of what that means. Right, just kill off the elderly, like kill everybody, like kill all those people off. Who gives a shit about them, right? Like we're diving straight into like genocidal eugenics territory with a lot of these people, right? That's what the herd immunity shit is all about. Literally, the strong will survive. I finished my audiobook. I finished the audiobook I was working on, and so tonight I'm diving back into the audition thing. That's the part of it that I don't actually like. I like having the project. I don't like auditioning for projects. But I got to get over it. I just got to be like, yeah, it's fine. Like it is. It's completely fine. Like it's I'm just being a baby. But like I like reading. I like reading aloud, as you guys have noticed, right? It's just annoying that I've got to like sell myself to be able to do it. Hey Eric, how you doing, bud? Eric, I've been watching One Piece like mad. Good recommend. If you guys want a fun, good time, if you want to be able to like just have a nice, excellent adventure that is following a supernatural person as he pursues his objective of becoming the king of the pirates, Boy, howdy, have I got a show for you. What a great recommend, Eric. I just finished the Nami arc, and I gotta tell you, of all of the arcs that are in that show, Nami's arc is fucking the most brutal. Nami's arc is unbelievable. Yeah, and it never ends, but what can you do? What can you do? Right? It's got me. It's got me. I'm curious to see where it goes. Yes, thank you, and I absolutely, Eric. And it's like absolutely the definition of just like a good story well told. It doesn't get in its own way. It doesn't complicate things. Every character gets their own, like, no one is just there to say a line, right? Like, everybody gets, like, fleshed out. Everybody gets, like, a background. Everybody is... And what's so beautiful about it is they're going through the story with such, like, care, and they really genuinely let everybody live as who they are, and they really, really care. But a lot of the characters are very weird. It's my favorite. It's absolutely my favorite. Like, literally two guys who are, like, brothers who are dressed up as cats and use, like, cat claws. You're just like, if you were to just say it out loud like I just did, it sounds so fucking stupid. But it completely works, and it's so good. It's so good. Like, there's just, like, no bad ideas. And I think the smartest thing I'm going to get off One Piece in just a second. We'll get back into politics, guys. Eric is in the chat, and I want to let him know how sweet I think this is. And I'm trying really hard not to spoil anything. But I think one of the most brilliant things that the show does is it uses a lot of Western lore that has fallen out of the consciousness, right? Like, one of the main characters' name... This is kind of a spoiler, but it's within the first 6 episodes, so I don't care. One of the main characters' name is Zoro, right? And that's completely a Western story, right? The story of Zoro. But, like, when was the last time anybody used Zoro as a character, right? Like the Antonio Banderas, like, 1990s film, Zorro, and then not since the 60s before that. And so it's this character that exists within the mind of the consciousness of the Western mind, but it's kind of inert. It's not really being utilized, and so the writer and the author has pilfered a lot of that kind of stuff where it's like existent but not at the forefront, and so it makes it very like just by saying the character's name of Zorro, it carries with it this kind of weight that exists within our consciousness, which I really like, and it's very clever. It's very clever. Oh, just a warning, just because you learn some stuff now, it doesn't mean that Oda, his finish over the character arc, like he doesn't finish the character arc. Is that what you're saying? Sorry, dude. I lost in translation, I think, on that one. All right. Let's do the number draw, guys. Let's do the number draw. Now that I've chewed your ear off about One Piece and how sweet I think One Piece is, I'm going with a 10. I'm just gonna go big. You know, fuck it.
Here we go for today's number. It's February 7, 2022.
I know, Mock, you're in for a 7. As y'all.
Each ball
with
has
an 8
a number.
tacos for Jesus. Doomed to bloom.
Numbers 1 through 10.
That's a heavy-duty name right there.
Swirl
tons of 8s.
numbers.
Tons of 8s. Swirl the numbers.
Pick a number.
Here we go. Nova Scotia, how you doing, bud?
Today's number is...
Merry Christmas. Bit late, bud.
9.
9. Whiff across the board. Went right over everybody's head. Just like squeak right through. Right beneath my 10. Right over that 8. Isn't that the way? Right when you think you've got it all tightened up. Such is life. Demand better. What are you saying Merry Christmas for, bud? Come on. It's February now. Come on, bud. Get out of here with that Merry Christmas. We don't want to hear that. Income growth over time, right? Like, and it doesn't take a genius to figure this shit out. 1946 to 1980, right? The bottom 50%, right? Making big gains. Like the middle 98, right? Top 1%, right? Now look at it, right? Doesn't take a fucking genius to figure out what's going on here. Like, if you keep giving money to people who don't need it, it's going to collapse your fucking economy. It does. Like, it's gotten quite obvious. Like, it's gotten quite obvious what's going on. And as I say all the time, right? The trouble is that the capitalist system has overwhelmed and co-opted completely the halls of power. That there literally is not a single politician within the power structure that even cares about the truth of what is going on in our society. They simply do not care. They might care to the degree that they need to mouth platitudes to the populace, but they're certainly never going to do anything about it. You can see that within the housing crisis, right? You can see that with the rising inflation rate. You can see that with the jacking up of rent. Like, the political class is not capable of responding. They're just not interested in it because it doesn't affect, the two people they actually work for. Like, and this to me, I was thinking about this the other day because we had a very robust and frank conversation in the chat on Friday about someone like Jimmy Dore. And I'm not going to go back into Jimmy Dore, but but there was one point where people were saying, like, yeah, but Dore, he says that what they're experiencing is crony capitalism. And that's sort of his thinking. And my defense of it is like, yeah, but he's not really well read. Like, he's just a dude, right? And so it makes sense. But what we're experiencing is like, and so of course I get to thinking about like, okay, well, what is the difference between something like crony capitalism and just like the capitalist system? And it really is just like a fantasy that's being perpetrated by people who are saying crony capitalism, right? Oh no, this is crony capitalism. I like real capitalism. So it's the most utopian view possible because any capitalist system, right? Eventually the wealthy will just own the political system because that's the way it's structured. And if your objective was to maintain the system of capital but not permit it to overwhelm and take over the political system, then you would spend all of your time and resources focusing on that and would probably still fail because of the overwhelming power of even one person with $1 billion. Like, there's just like not a connection into our mindset or brain whatsoever that like $1 billion is like, oh, it's like I can see it when I talk to people. Like, it's like talking to a person who actually genuinely believes that if a tsunami level tidal wave was coming to wipe out their town, that they could just swim through it. Like, that's really how people think about like $1 billion. They just think that, oh, you can just like swim through it and get a job and like be reasonable in the communities. Like, no, dude, like it's a tsunami of capital that will wipe you out. And so this distinction that exists between crony capitalism and normal capitalism, I think is just fantasy. I think it's just wishes. Like it's there's nothing more utopian than that. Than believing that like, no, if we'll just do some minor reformism to the system and that will somehow ameliorate. Like, no, it's not going to happen. If you have a person with $1 billion, the system is owned by default, like by default. That's how it works. Anyway, I don't know. I was thinking about that all this weekend because it's like, yeah, it's just like we're retreating into fantasy. Well, I shouldn't say we're retreating into fantasy. Neoliberalism is a fantasy in the first place. And so it makes sense that people who have been living in a fantasy world for so long would continue to believe that they can retreat into other fantasies and have those be effective. I want to make happy holidays the most common winter solstice greeting and Merry Christmas into a general secular greeting. That would annoy the right-wing Christians, but most would find it funny. You do you, bud. You do you. I'm not gonna hate you for it. I'm not gonna hate you for it. I'm gonna tell you, I don't celebrate Christmas at all. So like, I don't consider Christmas a holiday. I don't consider it a net positive for the populace. I think all of the rhetoric surrounding Christmas is total fucking bullshit, and hypocritical. I find the people who are most invested into Christmas to be the most asinine. I respect when people are just like, yeah, I just want to get together with my family, give some gifts, and have a good time. I'm just like, yeah, but you don't need an excuse for that, do you? And we don't really go back to like the medieval era. The Christmas period, people were taking weeks off. Like, it was like a week-long festival where everyone was just eating everything. Like, and part of that is just practical because you have food that's going to spoil, right? So what do? You just throw a fucking huge-ass festival. You don't have anything else to do. There's snow on the ground, right? It's cold. So just like fucking have a huge-ass festival, eat all your food, right? Have a great time, throw an orgy, right? Have a good time. We don't do that shit. It's literally work your ass off. Also take a part-time job called celebrating Christmas, I guess, while you're working your ass off through the period of time. Oh, we'll give you a day off. Like, get fucked. Get completely fucked. Zorro is based on the Buddhist belief system. What I mean is that Oda is a master planner, where he will reveal more about what is going on in a certain arc in later arcs, and going, oh yeah. No, I know what you mean, Eric. He's great at just sprinkling things through. Right, like he'll in One Piece they'll have like a scene that's a flashback, and there'll just be like one little thing that happens within that scene that like informs the character's decisions in other places. But it's just like a tiny little, like somebody pulling something out of a box or something within a memory. That really colors the characters in real ways. And that's what's so interesting about One Piece, is that the characters are so, like, they should be one-dimensional. That's really what it is. Like, given, like, the show is almost childish in its cartoonishness, right? The protagonist's goal is to become the king of pirates. His right-hand man is to become the world's greatest swordsman, right? Like their ambitions are the ambitions of 5-year-olds, and when they do flashbacks and stuff, you realize that that's actually accurate. That these are the ambitions that they had when they were children, and now here they are trying to be pirates and swordsmen and like all of this kind of like childish sort of stuff. But that really works because it connects to everyone's desires when they were a child. Right? Chances, like, this is what following your dream is, right? This is what we mean when we say, like, oh, your dreams didn't manifest or anything. Like, this desire that you had when you were a child that is true and genuine, right? And that's why we connect to these characters so easily. But then they move forward, and as they move forward, you realize that these characters are actually, they're full of color. Like, there's so much going on. The depth of, like Nami, now that I'm finished the Nami arc, like, Nami's my favorite character now. And it's just like, holy shit. Like, here's a character who I thought was just like a woman interested in the pursuit of treasure for treasure's sake, right? But you find that there's this really rich and deep and intense and scary backstory to that really propels it out of that kind of childish space that someone like Luffy lives in for sure. But so you get the sense that there's, as you're watching it, the show is going to get very serious and very grown up. But it's starting in this, like, for God's sakes, one of the pirates that Luffy fights right away is a clown. Like, a literal clown. And, like, that's where it starts. But given what I've seen with the Nami arc, like, it seems to me as though this show is going to get very grown up very quickly. Well, as quickly as anime does. What is your opinion on penny capitalism or regional capitalism? I mean, that to me is just trade, right? Like, what people call penny capitalism or regional capitalism is literally just like the people who are living with one another, trading with one another, right? It's inevitable. It's going to happen, right? When I'm discussing capitalism, I'm discussing who owns the means of production, right? And, like, you can have similar conflicts in small townships and societies. But the real brutality of what this capitalism system is that we don't even know who our owners are, right? In a penny capitalism system or regional capitalism system, you know who owns you, right? You're aware of it, but you have to. Like, it's just how it is. But so that means that you can, like, fuck with them and you can, like, do stuff to them, right? But in this system of capital, you don't even know who your owners are, right? It's difficult to understand that there are actually only a handful of faceless owners, right? And to understand who they are and how they own you is also very difficult to understand, right? Like, that's why people say get a job, because they actually believe that there are more than like 5 or 6 owners. Like, they actually believe that there's like a wide array of options, because they only see the manager or, like, you know, the person who's running the establishment. That's as far as they go. Or maybe they go as far as the CEO, right? And because CEOs are so prevalent, like so thrust in front of us and like are given like a superstar sort of a status, we're supposed to believe that that's the owner. And CEOs aren't the owner, right? The owner are the billionaire class who own the shares of all of this stuff. And the smartest billionaires only own small amounts of shares of everything. That's your David Thompson, right? David Thompson is, well, he is probably not a genius, but the people running his organization are very smart. He doesn't own anything, right? He owns small pieces of everything. So if this starts to decline and collapse, they just shift it away, right? Or if he loses money even, which, I mean, is unlikely given the amount of money he has. Like, literally banking institutions pay him for the right for him to have that money. So it's just unbelievable. But if you don't actually understand what your economy looks like, you don't understand what your system looks like. And then people will say dumb shit, like, shit they don't realize is dumb, which is like, well, then don't go work for a big corporation. Go work for a mom and pop shop. And it's like, yeah, because that mom and pop shop doesn't have a big fucking loan to a bank that's owned by who? Oh, the billionaires, right? Like, all paths lead to the same small cabal. And so, like, it's all well and good to talk about penny capitalism or regional capitalism or any of that kind of stuff, but it's essentially you're talking about trade. But at the end of the day, the institutions that you're doing that penny capitalism to are owned by banks and owned by corporate power structures that are in turn owned by this faceless oligarchy, right? Which, and it's that obfuscation, that purposeful obfuscation, like it's intentionally done, right? Like, the very fact that every economist in North America is not pointing out this dynamic that I am describing right now tells you that it's being done on purpose, right? It's obvious, it's clear. If you're an economist and you're not talking this way, then you're a fraud. The society is obviously owned by a billionaire class that owns the banks, that owns the political apparatus, and thereby owns the means of production completely. And penny capitalism or not, like, and even if you do it on small scales, it results this way, right? As long as it's a closed system. The only thing that penny capitalism has going for it is that you actually, like, know who owns it, right? You're just like, oh, he's over there. He's down the street. I can go knock on his door, right? Like, you want to go knock on David Thompson's door? Like, good luck. You won't get past the gate. And even if you do, like, no one in Canada knows who this guy is. That, to me, is his true genius, right? And I do attribute this to David Thompson to a great deal, to a great degree. Like, people like Elon Musk make no fucking sense to me at all. I shouldn't say they don't make any fucking sense, but they're stupid, right? Like, why the fuck would any billionaire want to put themselves in front of the public and be like, look at me, I'm the greatest? Like, it's so fucking stupid, right? It's way smarter to just, like, be the billionaire that owns everything and no one knows who you are, right? That's David Thompson. No one knows who this guy is, right? It's brilliant. And he owns, like, one of the largest newspapers in Canada. He's deeply entrenched in, like, the Bell, Telus, Robellis conglomerate, right? Like, he owns, like, 20% of everything that exists here in Canada, but nobody knows who he is. Brilliant. Like, it's so smart. You can't fight him if you don't know he's there. But yes, Oda does visit ideas all across the globe, time and place. Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, One Piece. Dun, 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 One Piece. I've been watching a lot of One Piece, thanks to Eric. As for crony capitalism, I always hated that argument because to me, it's a no true Scotsman argument. That's a good way of looking at it too. Just like literally, like, oh, this isn't capitalism. This isn't true capitalism. It's what they always accused us of saying on the left. It's like, oh, that's isn't true communism. It's like, well, I actually meant the argument that it was true communism, right? Like that it's a process, and the trouble is that it got interfered with. I differentiate penny capitalism, corporate capitalism. I think somebody creating something and selling it is not the worst thing, such as a farmer growing food and selling it to the market. I mean, sure, like, but really, like, you're not really describing capitalism there, right? That the defining attribute of capitalism is who owns the means of production. Like, who can simply withhold goods from the public? Who can simply say, we're not going to make that, right? And so, like, if that farmer only decided because he wanted to, like, let's say that farmer is a multimillionaire. He's just a super rich farmer, which definitely exists. And if that farmer just decided, I'm just going to grow enough food for me and my family, and the rest of you can starve, right? Like, he can make that decision because he owns the means of production. And the argument by the capitalist is that he would never do that, even though we definitely see farmers do that, because why would a farmer bother putting in more work if he doesn't have to, right? And, like, again, though, like, any system that is, like, 100 people, like, any small, tiny, little system is usually going to be worked out just amongst the people, right? That if this farmer started to act this way, people would show up at his house, right? Like, that's what would actually happen. That if we rely on you to grow the food, and this is something my brother convinced me of forever ago, right? That political systems and systems generally don't. What really matters is people's interaction with them, right? That the structure of the system is only really noticeable and really bad when people stop participating in the system, or people assume the system can automate or just create a rolling snowball effect. But if you have like 100 people, it wouldn't really matter what the structure of that system was. Like, you could live in a straight up dictatorship as long as everybody was interacting with it and talking to one another. And like, if the dictator started to act like a crazed lunatic, everybody would be like, get fucked, get out of here, right? Like, so this is the discussion, I think, when it comes to penny capitalism. It's like, I feel like whenever I talk to people about it, they're like, but it kind of works on a smaller scale. And I'm like, yeah, lots of things work on a kind of a smaller scale. We're trying to organize a society that has 300 million people in it. Like, we're trying to organize a complex, difficult machine, right? Like, and the conversation of penny capitalism, right, in my view, it exists just as a way for people to keep a foot planted on the idea that capitalism might be worth a goddamn. When the reality is that the reason why penny capitalism doesn't take everything over and just eat it is because the people who are involved in it don't allow it to, because it's so small, right? And then the true reality is that penny capitalism does evolve into corporate capitalism, right? That if you allow penny capitalism to go on, well, okay, so you've got a bunch of small different groups of people, and they're all doing penny capitalism, right? Small scale. Well, then one buys up another, right? So you've got a larger guy, and then you've got a bunch of other smaller ones, right? And then what happens? The larger guy eats up. And if this is also happening over here, so then you get two guys, and they go, well, eventually they come head to head, and one eats the other, right? And that's the true, like, that's what happens with penny capitalism. Like, if people want to do it, okay, like, I think it's a dumb idea, and you shouldn't, right? But I can't stop you, because it's going to result in the large-scale takeover system. That's how it works. It's monopoly, right? Like, when you play a game of Monopoly, you're essentially a penny capitalist, right? You don't own anything. You've got $1,500, right? You go around the board, you buy a property, you're a penny capitalist, right? Well, what happens at the end of a game of Monopoly, right? your massive scale, huge hotels. You've got dominant control over all the land, right? Like, penny capitalism leads to corporate capitalism. It's and again, like, so somebody who wants to try to defend capitalism through a penny capitalism kind of thing, it's like defending cancer growth because it's not killing you today. Like, yeah. Yeah, and that's what you guys are saying. It's capitalism like a virus. But again, like, I mean, I think momentum carries people a lot. You guys are basically just saying what I just said. 300 army troops just stationed in Germany. 1,000 troops in Brava are being transferred to Romania, sent to Lithuania. I gotta tell you, I feel like all that troop movement, mocked, is just the United States getting ready for a withdrawal from Ukraine. That they're withdrawing to a back position. That it's not that they're moving forward, it's that they're moving back. Like, I think this whole Ukraine thing is the United States is trying to deal with the reality that it is a dumb goober. Like, really. Like, how many times do we need the United States to show us that they're fucking a dumbass goober, right? Like, the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war is just like dumbass gooberism, just a psychopath smashing himself around, right? So they're going to do the same thing elsewhere, and that's exactly what's happening with Ukraine. That they literally were just like, oh, Ukraine isn't a NATO state. Ukraine could be NATO. Everyone will be completely fine with that. Normal. Meanwhile, the Russians are just like, no. Like, that's not going to fly. It's not going to fly at all. They didn't even bother asking. They didn't even bother talking to anybody. Like, they literally were just like, oh, Ukraine. Ukraine is in NATO. Hey, Ukraine, do you want to be NATO? No? Well, then we'll get rid of you. And this guy will be leader, and you be NATO? Good, yeah, this guy be NATO. NATO's good because NATO, yeah, that's our guy right there. Like, Russia's just like, hey, NATO was started in order to destroy the Eastern Bloc and like dismantle the Soviet Union and attack Russia, and now you're telling me you want to take over a place that shares a border with us so that you can, like, put tanks and shit right on our fucking border? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem though, right? Because we're the greatest nation in the world. We're the greatest nation in the world. USA. That's really the quality of the discussion that's going on. And I think it is starting to reach a turning point because the Ukrainian conversation is starting to hit the mass of the people. That it's like, for the last like 5 years, the mass of the people have just been like so inundated with nonsense that they're just like, what, Ukraine? Okay, Ukraine, great, fucking whatever. But now enough people are starting to be like, what the fuck is going on in Ukraine? Like, what the fuck is this even? And people are starting to tune in, and even the people who are like on the US side of the conversation are just like, what the fuck are we doing there? What the fuck is this? Why are we fucking around in Ukraine? What the fuck? And that's like the pro-US side. Like, that's the people who are just like, yeah, USA all the way, right? Like, so I think that what you are looking at is you're looking at a big, dumb, psychopathic idiot going, I think that we gotta de-escalate the situation and, talk about a diplomatic solution. Everybody wants to, do good in the world, and then they turn to their own citizens like, Russia might attack at any moment, Russia might attack at any moment, don't pay attention to that coup. Just everything's fine, right? Like, and honestly, when it comes to it, like, outside of the loss of life and the destruction and all this kind of ridiculous bullshit that's indicative of the United States, just like a big fucking dumb giant smashing around with a club that it's too fucking heavy to wield and is so stupid. Outside all that really ridiculous consideration, it is actually fine. Like, the U.S. is going to withdraw from Ukraine. Ukraine is going to become a buffer state, like it should have been in the first place. The United States did not go into Ukraine being like, we're going to go to war with Russia, and we're going to get those Ruskies, and that'll show them. They literally went into Ukraine being like, oh, hey, I've got a map. This part of the map is blue. This part of the map is red. This little place right here is gray. Well, that little place should be blue, don't you think, Jets? Yeah, let's make that little part of the map blue. Okay, let's go. And they just didn't even talk to anybody. Literally, if they had to talk to one person, that person would have stood up and been like, no, Ukraine, given the history of the Soviet Union and NATO, it's absolutely crucial that Ukraine remain as a buffer state and is essentially left alone to make its own decisions and trade how it sees fit. And it's absolutely crucial that that be the case because that actually is a signal to Europe, Russia, China, and North America, in fact, that the United States is actually interested in peace and isn't just a psychopath. Right? And so, this is really what's being proven to the rest of the world right now by the United States. That is the United States a raving psychopath? I mean, yes. But is that raving psychopath capable of even basic reason? Right? And I think the Americans, under Biden at least, will see what happens when Trump gets back in. But Trump was also interested in pulling out of Afghanistan, so it's like Trump and Biden were basically of one mind on this kind of stuff, but it was all just kind of petty politics. Anyway. It really does look to me like the end game for Ukraine is that NATO's going to pull out. They're going to reestablish the independence of Ukraine. It'll be ruled by fascists for a while, for sure, just given what has happened in Ukraine. And that'll sully relations between Russia and Ukraine for a while, but then eventually there'll be a resurgent leftist movement, maybe rallying underneath the first guy in the first place, who they couped in the first place, right? That's been known to happen in these kinds of situations. And Ukraine will reestablish itself as a independent nation, as a buffer state, and it will define itself as such, because if there is any hope for peaceful relations coming out of the psychopath nation of the United States, it does rest in the fate of Ukraine. That, like, if we believe it is possible for this nation to regain its senses and pursue a path of peace at all, then it rests in what it does in Ukraine. Because the United States is essentially a rogue terrorist state. Like, it's in no way have we seen anything of it being interested in peace at all. And so if it's capable of withdrawing from Ukraine and de-escalating in Ukraine, that's a good signal. That's a good signal. Like, it could mean that the United States is actually attempting to pursue a path of even basic, like, awareness or like with a modicum, like the most itsy bitsy form of even self, just prove to the rest of the world that you're not a fucking suicidal maniac, right? Like, prove to everybody that you're not just a psychopath with a gun against your head being like, I'll pull the trigger, and you're just like, oh, okay, don't. And the way to do that is to just fucking get out of Ukraine and let them be independent, right? Show that you're capable of leaving things alone, right? Like basic, like grade, like kindergarten level shit. Like kindergarten level shit. Can we put a breakable object close to you and have you not break it? Like, really, that's where we're at when it comes to the United States. Can we put you in a room with something that breaks easily and have you not break it? Like, if you've ever been around kids ever in your life, you know that, like, there are kids. I was one of these kids, no doubt. I was one of these kids. If you put a breakable object in a room with me, it's broken. Like, it's broken. Like, I don't even know what to tell you. Like, it's you can't put like a vase, a piece of art, like anything. But like literally until I was like 18. If you put that shit in my space, it would break. And to a degree, it's still kind of true, honestly. It's actually, see, this plant here is a fucking miracle. Anyway. But, like, that's where the U.S. is at. Like, they're essentially a kindergartner basically trying to find out if they can not smash everything. No, you can hire communists to renovate your house. I just like that line. You can hire communists to renovate your house. Fantastic. Scholz stressed that it was going to be made very clear that further aggression towards Ukraine would be most inappropriate. Yeah, exactly. And I'm seeing like lots of signals along this way, right? I really do think the U.S. bit off more than it's exactly like the Iraq situation. Like, these guys thought Iraq was going to be a dust up. They thought they were going to go in there and just be like, yeah, USA, bro, mission accomplished. Woo, we did it. All right, sweet, USA, USA. Not a dust up. Same exact thing. They think this is going to be a dust up, and it turns out connecting to all kinds of stuff. Marx made it clear that private property is not a home. It's owning public spaces. You can hire someone to work on your house. A farmer's market is a perfect example of penny capitalism. You guys are having a nice conversation in here. It's always nice to see people talking about communism and all this. Thompson, Jim Pattison, yeah, dude. Owners employing people is not capitalism. Oh, yeah. At least be nice to one another, though, okay, guys? I gotta tell you, when it comes to these debates, I've watched a lot of debates, a lot of heated debates, okay? But the thing that I can't tolerate, and what makes me dump out, like, almost immediately, and you can see this, if you want to see, like, the clearest case that I've ever seen of this recently, go watch the Jackson Hinkle Sam Cedar debate, if you want to call it that. And where Hinkle just basically, like, tries to get the dagger, like, tries to get the dig. There's always, like, a dig, right? Just trying to get the dagger up in this, like, digging kind of way. And, of course, Sam Cedar, he's a professional, so he doesn't give a shit about that at all. But as the listener, I'm literally just like, oh, fuck off. Like, it's the most disingenuous bullshit thing. And so I always try to say, like, I'm not accusing anybody of doing that in the chat. I'm just saying that please be kind to one another in the chat, because I love seeing you guys talk, but it's when the digging starts that I get really, it's annoying. It's just annoying. Like, it's not. And I think it needs to be better understood, because it doesn't seem like it's very well understood. And I mean, I was a young man, and I fell for this pitfall as well. But, like, the person who's doing the digging looks weak and stupid. Like, and I don't think that's well understood in these conversations and in the stuff that we're seeing. And you can see it manifesting in young people getting involved in this process. That when you start digging on people, you don't look good, right? Like, what, like you end up looking like the asshole, because, like, it's completely unnecessary, right? It's being done completely for your own ego, and it's and I'm saying this for myself as well, because sometimes I have conversations with people and it feels so good to dig people, right? That's the problem with it, is that it feels good to do it. Because you think they're the enemy, and so I'm going to dig on them, and I'm going to get them. But people watching you do it, it's like watching a guy jerk off, right? Like, jerking off feels good, but no one wants to watch you do it. Except that special person who does. And in that case, cherish and love them. Cherish and love them. Doesn't mean the rest of us do. What a weird conversation I just had there. That's fun. The executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, every state has all three components, but some, depending on the system, those branches will be separated, 2, 3 merged together. Yep. And I mean, and they're all owned by capitalists. Enterprise is privately owned, capital accumulation is the primary motive. And market, classes, money, the state exist. Good evening to you, Islam, good to see you. Loaf, good to see you. Then it's ready to profit fall. Whole system begins to cannibalize itself, save itself. Man, you guys are basically running the show for me, man. I feel like I could just like put a voice onto this. Like if I could get like an automated voice, you know what I'm talking about. It's like when you start thinking about the state in that way, then states are completely inevitable because we can create any system and we'll have any of those components. Even let's just say use of a family unit, and then just like let that be the whole show. Gooberism with American characteristics, fantastic. You have the parents who are trying to do the executive stuff, cleaning the house, Then you also have to make rules upon rules upon rules. And I mean, but it's just so funny to me because like we really are struggling as a society with the concept of like there needs to be rules, right? Like our whole prevailing ideology for forever has been rules are stupid and dumb. It's just like doesn't actually work that way. Watson Roadster, don't think I've ever seen you around here, bud. Hopefully you're here to participate. Cool name, by the way. Cool name. I wonder if our host has ever read The Heartland Theory by Halford Mackinder. I have not, but if so, it thinks it applies to U.S. imperialism demands on Central Asia along with the Chinese demands on the same. So I haven't read this piece of work. And I mean, the United States, I'll say it over and over again. I don't necessarily know what the Heartland Theory is, but I definitely, like, all of this kind of fakery that the United States is going to go to war with China or all this kind of stuff, like, it's nonsense. If the U.S. went to war with China, it would collapse their economy instantly. Right? Like you want to spread homelessness, you want to make your society instantly fall into a revolution, go to war with China. Like the Americans have built it to be this way. Like, gut your manufacturing base, send it over to China, have China build everything for you, right? It'll be cheaper. Well, guess what happens? Now it means that if China demands something of you, you have to capitulate. Why? Because if China stops producing your shit, your economy collapses. Like, NAFTA has been a complete national security disaster. I can't express this enough. Like, people generally talk about the issue of income inequality or the income of this structure on like moral terms, but you can't really have that conversation with like 60% of the populace. They don't actually care about the morality of it. Not really. So the more effective tactic that I've begun to find is that it's a national security issue. Like, we can't produce our own shit. Like, that's dumb. That's dumb. This is pug owner wisdom here. Yeah, I've got the pug owner. Milo is actually pretty good when it comes to destroying shit. Like, he like ate one shoe once and went after a book once, and I made it very clear to him that is unacceptable, and he immediately was just like, that is unacceptable. And he's a good boy. He's a real good boy. Bad day to be late, comrade. You missed the resurrection of Lenin. Yes, the resurrection of Lenin, man. That was so fun when that happened. Oh, so good. Trotsky's head was repaired and has begun speaking again. Oh, man. Fictitious capital. Yeah. Look up the geographical... Sure, let's go. The geographical pivot of history. We got a Mackinder. We got this fella here, Mackinder. We got a fella who likes this handsome devil right here with this beautiful mustache. That was just an article. So, according to Mackinder, the Earth's land surface was divisible into the world island, right? Comprising the interlinked continents of Europe, Asia, Africa, Europe. Yeah. I'm actually a little bit familiar with this. The offshore islands, yeah, and the outlying islands, including the continents of North America, South America, and Oceania. I love that North America, South America, and Oceania are considered outlying islands. But yes, I haven't. I'm not familiar with this guy, but I'm familiar with this concept, and this is essentially the concept that the Chinese are operating on, right? That like they know that they've got this huge landmass connection, right? Most of the world's population lives here, right? It makes sense to have a more African or Middle Eastern centric worldview because that's where most people live. Right? Like, that's where most people live. And it's the largest landmass. It's the largest, all this kind of stuff. So it makes complete sense that we would actually act a little bit more consciously of this landmass. I mean, you know what? Grinning? You can have Antarctica. How about that? You can have it. I'm curious what he's talking about with this pivot area, though. What is this pivot area about? Because that looks like it's Russia, and it's like, Russia's not really a pivot area. Although he's writing in 1904, so that's fair. Like, that's fair. Yeah, what's this pivot area? Like, what is he talking about with that? Here. Pivot area. Signs of Mackinder's heartland theory can be found in the works. Dmitry, there's a significant geographical overlap with the heartland or pivot area in the immediate region, with the exception of Germany, Prussia. Mackinder. I mean, this is pre... Yeah, he's writing in 1904, so this is like pre-revolution. Yeah, this is like pre-revolutionary theory. So, doesn't really apply anymore, like the whole pivot area idea. But this idea, absolutely. Like, for God's sakes, like, it's where everybody lives. I have heard some American China hawks admit that yes, the economy will crash if there's a war, but at least we will be free. Like, they just use this word, freedom, right? The word freedom is so just, it's been completely emptied of any of its meaning. It's just a word that you say freedom, and everybody's supposed to like put their hand on their heart and salute and be like, freedom. But as we've seen in America, right, we're putting the dumb in freedom. Like, we're really working to put the dumb in freedom, man. Like, literally there's a protest movement going on at the Parliament building right now, and the central core of that movement is, let's get back to work. Freedom is working for billionaires. If you don't like that particular billionaire, go work for another billionaire. Or go work for another enterprise owned by the same billionaire. That's freedom. Dum 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 dum. That the point of the Chinese One Belt, One Road initiative, the Belt and Road initiatives, that's why the U.S. is setting its sight on the same area, control of the resources in Central Asia. Oh, yeah, absolutely, dude. Like, here, let's you want to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, bud? Let's fucking talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. I absolutely love it. I need a better map. This map's getting old. Because they've already started to build rail into Kabul. This map was pre the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and so this connection's going to be really, really clutch for the Chinese. But like, this Belt and Road Initiative, dude, it's serious, man. Like, this rail that's going on. Like, there's a little part of me that definitely believes that what's going on in Ukraine exists in order to fuck with this connection on the Belt and Road Initiative, but it's a losing game. It's completely a losing game, right? The reality is that the Chinese can build faster than the Americans can bomb. Like, that's just the truth. And and I'll be very curious to see, like, should Ukraine actually go independent, will they also get a connection into the Belt and Road Initiative, right? That China wants as many connections into Europe as it can get. This connection from this connection through the Eastern Bloc has been slow going because of NATO interference. Like, that's what's going on in these areas. And anytime you hear anything about Belarus, I mean, look, like, click. And so, like, America is extremely aware that Europe is steadily shifting away from America. That's the bit, and that's a deep existential thing, right? Like, that's not just like, oh no, trading partner, we're no longer the main trading partner with Europe. Oh no, that's like literally goes into like a white power place. It's literally just like our white ancestors are now going Chinese. Oh no, right? And like the holdouts right now are Germany and Italy, that they're still primary trading with America, but France, even the UK, Spain, a bunch, obviously like Minsk, like a bunch of these places, their primary trading partner is becoming China. And when the Americans re-elect the Republicans, Europe's gonna fucking freak out about it, dude. Like, Europe is looking at that Republican Party and they're like, yeah, we know what that is. We've seen that before. We're very aware of what that is. Like, they're and like within living memory, Europe was destroyed because of organizations like the Republican Party. Like, if the Republicans start to seize power in major ways, you watch. The Europeans are diving over to the Chinese. They're not going to stick around. Like, they have no reason to anymore. And like, the Americans are giving them every reason to bounce. So it's like this Belt and Road Initiative is so important to what's happening in the world. And I'm looking forward to seeing their expansion. Like, when the Americans finally get out of Iraq, which is an inevitability, I'm looking forward to the connections into the Suez Canal. Like, seeing how that goes. I'm dead convinced that the Saudis are building a city. They're building a city right here, right underneath Israel. Right? They're building a city right here called Neom, right? Which literally is New Future. That's what it translates into. And I'm dead convinced that the goal of that city, the entire point they're building that city, is so that they can build a rail from Tehran to Baghdad to Neom and then go underneath the Gulf of Aqaba to get to the Suez Canal, so that they can go around Israel and get into fucking Africa. Can you imagine what's going to happen in Africa? Like, they're already starting to get shit in there, right? But it's all sea-based, and they're trying to get out of being ocean trading because the Americans can fuck with them really easily in the ocean. Can't fuck with them on the land so easily. Not so easy to do. And again, like, I'd love to see a more updated version of this. Like, when did this map come out? Do they have a date on it? Yeah, 2018. So fairly recently, but 3 years. Like, given the speed that the Chinese are actually operating on, like, they run on 5-year plans, right? So if you've got a chart or something and it's 5 years old, it's out of date, right? And it's in a big significant way. Like, what's going to happen in Afghanistan is going to make the American system of capital look ridiculous. It's going to make it look absolutely stupid. It's going to look stupid. Like, they're going to build a rail right into Kabul, right through the Wakhan corridor, just right in there. And in 5 years, Afghanistan is going to look different. It's going to happen like boom. It's going to happen immediately. And the Taliban is hungry for it. Like, this is something that I think Westerners are of the opinion. They're like, oh, the Taliban are just power-hungry madmen who are essentially fascists, and the supremacy, the women's rights, and all this kind of crazy shit. But like, the Taliban want to live in a nice place too. Like, they want to live in a place that's not a bombed-out shithole where the CIA is walking around shooting their kids. Like, they want to live in a place that's like working, where there's, prosperity being delivered, right? Even if you do take them for like this psychopath kind of thing, well, they want to be rich, right? Like, they want to be rich, right? So the way to be rich is to take advantage of your natural resources, of which Afghanistan has trillions of dollars worth, and including some very rare shit, and get connected into the fucking Belt and Road Initiative, get that shit into China, man. Like, boop. You think China's not interested in this shit? Like, they're already building this rail. It's already happening. And like, so in 5 years, like, all of the destruction that America wrought on Afghanistan is going to have flipped. It's going to be a different place. And it's going to happen very, very quickly. So quick, and Americans are essentially just going to forget about it. Like that's how America rolls. They're just going to forget the 20-year war. Literally. Like they're going to talk about Afghanistan, and they're just not going to bring up the 20 years of warfare that they wrought on Afghanistan. It's just going to be deleted from the conversation. And so it's up to people like us to remind them, like, hey, get fucked, America. Like, why do you even feel like you have the right to critique this? Like, you literally destroyed the place for 20 years. Like, literally walking around with CIA death squads shooting children. Like, you have no right to critique anything that happens in this region. I wonder how they're going to react when that happens. They'll just not talk about it. That's just the straight up truth, Nut Milk. They're just not going to talk about it. Good to see you, by the way, bud. Like, they're just straight up not going to talk about it. It's just going to become like a black void hole where they're just going to be like, oh yeah, you know, Afghanistan, it's essentially a desert, right? And if they do talk about it, it'll be like a Naked Gun style like hero coming in and like, oh, I'm going after the evil villain of Afghanistan, Taliban or whatever, right? Like that's the scale of American communication. Like, the real question that's being answered today is whether or not these big powers can coexist. Like, that's really what it is. Like, is it possible for a powerful and peaceful and well-built China to coexist with America that theoretically should be doing the same? Like, China is showing that it can coexist peacefully with Russia, right? Like, what's stopping us? Like, really, what's stopping us? And the more you analyze it, the more you realize that the thing that's stopping us from living peacefully and coexisting is basic monkey shit. Basic, just like, they look different than us and that scares me. Like, that's it. Like, that's fucking it. Like, it really is just like, they're from a different place. That's not America. That's America. It's a great country in the world. That's America. You gotta live in America, and if you don't live in America and you don't support America, then you don't support America. Like, bro. Like, there's a lot of people in other places. Like, not every place is gonna look like your place. But that's just, we're stuck in it. We're stuck in this, like, xenophobic, deeply racist, deeply suspicious, deeply deeply hateful place. And with no signs of attempting to get out of it. Like, what we are doing to the Beijing Olympics, like what's going on with the Beijing Olympics makes us look like children. Like, most of the nation is saying, we should boycott the Olympics. It's like fucking babies. Like, it's baby time in the West, man. Like, we're and it's no longer good enough to blame the leadership. Like, it's no longer good enough to be like, our leaders are leading us astray. I mean, they certainly are, certainly. But, like, there's a healthy amount of stupid racists in the conversation who are literally saying, like upwards of 60 to 70% of the society is saying we should boycott the Beijing Olympics. Like, you are stupid. If you are saying that out loud, if you are actually saying that to people, you are a very, very, very childish person. Very stupid. The Olympics are like one of the only peaceful things going on, right? Like, it's a way for the nations of the world to talk to one another peacefully and to do something and compete with one another in a way that isn't let's drop bombs, right? Just like let's have peaceful competition, and let's see what we can do here, and let's see what we like, and let's get into rooms with one another, and let's have talks, and let's have these like peaceful conversations surrounding this idea of collaborative, like non-war based competition, right? And if you're saying you don't want to participate in that, then you're a fucking loser. Like, straight up. Like, you're a fucking loser. Like, if the nation that was hosting was literally in the middle of, like, an ethnic cleansing campaign, you should still go. Yeah. Why? Because going and saying to them, hey, stop that ethnic cleansing campaign, maybe. Right? Like, it is a political stage to do political stuff. And if you're just saying, we're not gonna go, right? Then that's the same as like Eric Cartman being like, I'm gonna take my ball and go home. Like, then go. And leave the adults alone, please. Like, if a child walks into a room and screams, I'm not gonna come, go away then. And like, and it drives me crazy that this is the majority position. It drives me crazy that the majority position is let's act like babies. Yeah, like Berlin in 36. Yeah. I mean, like, you got, like, no one said peace was easy. Especially when you got these losers walking around. What have you guys been chatting about? Freedom is to do whatever you want without consequences. Freedom is to the capitalists to whatever they want, and how those two freedoms interact with one another. I actually tend to think that freedom is, true freedom is consent. Like, that's really what it is. Like, true freedom is consent. And if there are people in the conversation who don't consent, then they're not really free. And if a person is not giving their consent for very reasonable things, claiming it's an infringement on their freedom, like wearing a mask, right? Well, that's a conversation we need to have, right? But if it just devolves into like, my freedom, like, yeah, okay, great. Like, you have the right to withhold your consent, right? That's without a doubt. Everyone has that. That's an intrinsic one. Like, that's an intrinsic right that you have. You have the right to withhold your consent. And then we have the right to ask you why you're withholding your consent, especially if withholding your consent endangers the rest of the populace or erects a system that suppresses the population. Like, this is what makes this plane of reality so interesting, is that everyone has their own consent. And some people's consent is, I don't want to give up slavery. Right? And so we can have some interesting conversations surrounding this. But the word freedom has become meaningless. Like, it's just meaningless. It's just a buzzword that people say to try to prove to themselves that they're good. But and the people, especially like the anti-maskers or the anti-vaccine people or any of this kind of stuff, they have no concept of like, they don't understand the concept of consent, right? Like, to them, it really is just, I want to do what I want to do. Without any conceptualization that, like, okay, but you live in, like, a community, right? Like, where we're having a negotiation about what is good or bad for the larger body, right? But if you never grow up and you're just selfish, then you can say what you like and do what you like, and then call it freedom. As it nears its 75th anniversary, Marxist newspaper Young Welt wants to double its circulation to 50,000 copies by May Day. Good effort, man. Good stuff. Let's see it. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go, Brandon! Not is so much nada interfering with the U.S. Europe is just a U.S. puppet, but that's what they're concerned about. Like, the U.S. is concerned that they're going to lose their puppet. Like, and they might. Like, it's like, Europe is not, like, they're not married. Like, it's not, they're not, like, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, it really is, like, if America collapses into a total form of fascism, which is kind of debatable as to whether or not it's already there, Like, if honestly, man, if I'm living in Germany, I'm looking at fucking that Republican Party and I'm being like, that's fucking Hitler. Like, tell me that's not fucking Hitler. Like, explain this to me. And then if somebody says like, oh yeah, but the Democrats are a little bit better, and you're just like, are they? Like, this genocide's still going on. Like, genocide there, genocide there. Hey, did we all notice the big major war that occurred in the Middle East under the Democrats and Republicans? Like, if I'm fucking living in Germany, I'm getting a bit like, okay, these guys are fucking like causing problems like right over here, like right the fuck over here. And that's causing problems for all these places, by the way. It's causing problems for obviously Russia. It's causing problems for Belarus, causing problems for Poland, right? Causing problems for all the surrounding area. Why? Because it's creating refugees, right? It's creating refugees. People are running, right? It's creating a refugee crisis. Of course it is, right? Like, it's like, and you're funding neo-Nazis and shit. Like, if I'm living in Germany, I'm gonna be like, okay, maybe not. Can we maybe not fund neo-Nazis? Like, if the United States goal was to alienate its own allies, it's been doing a bang up job. It's been doing a bang up job. India has a population bubble that will peak after China's. India is actually a large threat to Chinese hegemony. I think that's true, Grinning. Yeah, and the Indians see it that way. This is a really interesting conversation, by the way. Like, you want to get into what I consider to be like a really interesting conversation about what's happening in this area. It isn't about the United States. The United States is like an annoying little fly off on the side as far as the Chinese are concerned. The Japanese and the Indians are far more consequential to Chinese politics, right? That, like, think about what would happen in this region if India all of the sudden experienced a kind of economic boom and economic growth and poverty reduction that China experienced, right? Which it could, and it can. It just needs to decide to, right? Like, what happened in China and what's still going on in China isn't just happening, right? The Chinese people decided to do it. They looked at one another and said, like, yeah, let's just get rid of this bullshit. Let's just fucking make the place better. And so they're doing it. And, like, is it perfect? Obviously not. Like, there's obvious shit that always goes wrong all the time, right? Because it's people. Like, there's no getting away from it. But if India decided to turn around and be like, hey, yeah, wait a minute, we could do that too. And it could, and it can. And just like we could. And we just decide not to. So the only thing that's actually keeping India out of, like, really significant competition with China is that they're choosing not to. Right? And as long as they continue to choose to support this failed neoliberal ideology that doesn't work, then China will be the dominant power in the world. And the longer that goes, the dominant power in the region. And the longer that goes, right, the further ahead the Chinese will be. So that when India finally gets its act together and starts actually taking care of its own citizens and actually starting to work for the benefit of their own citizens, they'll have a lot of catching up to do, right? It's going to be interesting to see if China falls into a down rut, right? Civilizations often do this, right? Especially ones that have, like, a big period of growth, they'll have, like, a downward rut. China's not there yet, and it looks like the power structure is doing everything it can to avoid it. Because usually those downward ruts occur because of corruption, right? That the power structure gets taken over by a small group of psychopaths, which is exactly what's happened in the United States, which is why we're in a pretty significant decline. But the Chinese power structure is doing everything it can to avoid that. Like, literally, Xi Jinping's entire mandate has been anti-corruption. Like, this guy is fucking executing billionaires. Like, this guy's fucking doing some serious shit. Like, shit that if can you imagine any political structure in the West even arresting a billionaire at this point? Like, even turning to a billionaire and saying, that was a crime, we are arresting you and we are trying you with that crime, right? And what would you expect if that occurred here in the West? Well, you would expect it to be a fine. That's what you would expect, right? In China, they're, like, grabbing billionaires and fucking executing them. Like, you did a crime. This is your crime. You go to, like, what? So, for example, like what happened in 2008, like the 2008 financial collapse, like the billionaire class would have been executed for that in China, right? And it's difficult for me to judge them for it, right? It's what our inability to actually, or our unwillingness to actually seek any kind of reasonable punishment towards the people who caused the 2008 financial collapse should be all the evidence you need to understand that our system is in collapse, right? Like, we're not even capable of incarcerating criminals. And so the concern for China at this stage in the game is to not fall into that corruption. Don't let the political system get taken over by the psychopathic reactionaries. And the real test of the strength of the Chinese system is going to be when Xi Jinping passes the baton to the next leader. That passing of the baton is going to be like one of the seminal important moments in Chinese history, because they are well aware that the neoliberal power structure wants to dismantle the communist power structure like they did in the Soviet Union, right? They're well aware of that. Like, how could you not be? And if they can continue it going, India's got a long way to go, man. Like, India's got a long way to go. Like, they're still dealing with, like, grinding poverty. Like, they're still dealing with, like, people in dust huts and shit. Like, they're still dealing with, like, some very, very, very serious problems, with no indication that they care to resolve it. So, until they actually start doing that, then China's just going to take off, moon bases, like all kinds of crazy shit, and India's just going to still be living in kind of the poverty and squalor that it chooses to live in. I mean that. Like, if the people of India wanted to overthrow their leadership, take it over, and start building a society that's for the benefit of the people, they could. Just like we could, right? But it's about organization. It's about trying to work it out. Like, China's a bit lucky. I shouldn't say lucky, but, like, they went through a massive conflict to get to where they are now. Like, the level of conflict that existed in this country in order to get to where they are now was astounding. Like, open warfare, like, guns firing, like, outright, it was a war. Like, there's no other way to describe it. It was a fucking war. And will we have to face that same kind of thing? I hope not. Anyway. This would enrich the global south. The white man will quiver. I mean, like, white supremacy can't survive much longer. It really can't. Like, just like outright as a prevailing ideology. Like, it not that it ever could. Like, white people are the minority by a lot. And, like, this concept of white supremacy, like this idea that we're the best because we're white, like, it's not going to live much longer. And the people who cling on to it are going to become, like, overt and obvious psychos. Good opportunity. Here's grinning. You beautiful champion. Reminding everybody, 19 in chat, 11 likes. Smash the like button. Also, I got a Patreon, guys. I got a Patreon. Please donate $1. Even $1 helps. Makes me feel good about myself. Makes me smile. Makes me cheer a little bit every single time it happens. Do think about donating $1. We gotta or more, right? I'm not gonna stop you if you want to donate a whole bunch of money, but, like, we do have to support leftist voices. Like, this is the reality of where we are at. I just listened to a Chris Hedges interview, and Chris Hedges was talking about his own experience with internet censorship and suppression, right? And, like, this is like a New York Times, like, war correspondent, like a guy that if anybody should be listened to in the conversation, it's a man like Chris Hedges. And the power structure is doing everything it can to remove him from the conversation. So if they're doing that to him, they're doing it to me, for sure. So if you're listening to me say this, and you're like, what can I do to support leftist voices? Well, I've got a Patreon down below. Even $1, even a single dollar helps. So please think about becoming a Patreon. Because boy howdy, would it be nice if I could start paying my rent with this. That'd be the greatest. Reminds me of the episode of Futurama where they invade the ball aliens. Yeah, we don't know their language or history, but we can assume this. They stand for everything we don't stand for. Yeah. That's American war. Like, absolutely. We don't know anything about them. We don't know the first fucking thing. My favorite were the people who, like, we would invade areas, and then there were these, like, liberal types, like Sam Harris, who felt that it was rational to critique the culture of the people we were destroying. Like, you don't get much more white supremacist than that, frankly. Like, oh, we can go in there and blow them up, but if they fight back, it's because they're evil Muslims, right? It's also kind of fascinating how quickly they were to disqualify Russia for their doping scandal way back. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's total bullshit. Oh, you missed the first part of my statement. I said freedom for a right-wing libertarian when they define me freedom. What they really mean is those two kinds of freedom I was talking about. Fair enough, Eric. Fair enough. Like, I'm seeing more and more, right? The right-wing libertarians are just, they're not even trying anymore. They're literally just like, yeah, you work a job or you die. And you're like, don't you think that's harsh? No. And that's like it. Like, it is becoming that way. That, like, more and more the people who genuinely think it's work or die, it's survival of the fittest, those people are beginning to take more and more prominence on the stage. Where it's getting clear that you can't actually convince or negotiate with them. Right? Their position genuinely is, work a job, if you can't, you die, that's fine. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, conversation is over then, right? You're just my enemy. You're like a little greasy sidekick for capitalism. Like, you're like Beastly from Care Bears, right? That, like, No Heart is like the corporation, and he has this, like, evil little stupid sidekick. It's like, yeah, that's what's happening in the world today. There are a lot of people who are ignorant of the value of their neighbors, fellow man, and their well-being. Yeah, they just don't care, right? They just don't care. And in my view, it's because they just never grew up, right? It's not part of our education system. It's not part of anything. We don't teach people how to do any of that. And it's normal for a child to be selfish, right? Which makes sense. It's like complete survival, right? It's just complete survivalism, right? You're a little child. You're just trying to figure things out and live. Like, that's the extent. So it makes total sense that you would be like a little psycho, right? Because you're just trying to do stuff for you so that you can survive, so that you can thrive, so that you can do this. And you need to be taught the value of connecting, right? You need to be taught how to connect to other people. You need to be taught these things, right? And we just don't do that, nor do we care to do that. And so you end up with a bunch of, like, 50-year-old babies, basically. Just like 50-year-olds who never grew up, who like literally didn't even watch Sesame Street. So they just, like, when we say sharing is caring, they're just like, sharing is for snowflake babies. Work or die. And that is where they are, right? And it's up to us to get enough people together so that we can overwhelm the work or die crowd. Yeah, and of course they want to make China's progress invisible. Like, or even better, Isaac, they want to claim it for themselves, right? Capitalism has helped more people in poverty than any other system. Just don't pay attention to the fact that all those numbers happen in China. If you take China out of that equation, right? If you remove China from the poverty alleviation stats that the capitalists are talking about, the problem has gotten much worse because of capital, right? That, like, what China didn't resolve the problems of poverty in their society through capitalism. They resolved it by mandate. They chose to, right? They looked at the problem and they said, the problem is that homeless people don't have houses. The problem is poor people don't have money. So what did they do? They gave homeless people houses and they gave poor people money. And I'm not saying that China is like a perfect fucking utopia or anything, but like, they're a sight better than we are. You need to pair balance freedom with compassion, I guess. Well, I mean, it's freedom for the individual versus freedom for the group, right? And one would argue that your freedom to not wear a mask doesn't overwhelm someone else's freedom to not get infected with a deadly virus, right? Like that is the conversation that's actually happening. That there are multiple forms of freedom, right? And a person should be free to not get an infectious disease. And I think that overrides your freedom to not wear a mask. Like, little piece of cloth over your face, person dying of a disease. Like, this is the degrees that we're talking about. And especially hilarious are the people walking around being like, I have to put a little piece of cloth on my face. This is like the Holocaust. Like, I don't think you can see a clearer definition of like white privilege than a white person comparing putting a piece of cloth on their face to the Holocaust. You have never experienced a moment's hardship in your life if what you are saying is, I'm putting a piece of cloth over my face, that's the Holocaust. Or even if it's like someone's telling me to get a vaccine, that's the Holocaust. Like, someone mandated that I have to get a vaccine, that's the Holocaust. Like, you are so disconnected from reality and so privileged that you don't understand how psychotic that statement is. You're totally right. You're totally right, DJ. I was a bit disorganized getting this show put together, but oh no, the whole show it's collapsing. Thanks for letting me know though, but I appreciate it. Great stream so far. Nut milk. From a guy named Nut Milk, that's high praise, bud. That's super high praise. I gotta tell you guys, I'm so happy we're not talking about the convoy. I got all this convoy shit right here, and I honestly don't give a shit at all. I'm like, yeah, there's the convoy. Like, you know what? Let's before I'm gonna get into this, Nut Milk, I promise. But like, court grants injunction to silence honking in downtown Ottawa for 10 days, right? People are getting sick of it. They want these fucking truckers gone. As of midnight tonight, police will be cutting off the fuel supply to convoy occupation supporters. Anyone bringing gas, diesel, or propane will be charged with assisting an illegal activity. So they want this shit gone. They want this shit gone. Like, I would want it gone. Like, it's so fucking annoying. Ottawa police may seek military assistance as Freedom Convoy protesters dig in. Lawsuit filed against convoy organizers seeking damages. Yeah, it's time to end the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa by enforcing the law and following the money. And that's the Globe and Mail that just said that. Yeah, okay, that's outside of the convoy. Yeah, Conservatives demand Trudeau end Freedom Convoy protests they fully support and hope continues. The Beaverton. I am blazing through this, guys, because I honestly, like, the convoy shit, I'm so fucking tired of it. Of course, in the wake of this, Paul Vier, I'm running for Prime Minister to give you control back of your life. Like, he's the next guy. Like, he's the guy. If you don't know Pierre Poilievre, right, here
They're spending more than at any time since World War II, so they control more of what you earn, and you control less. They've caused inflation by borrowing and printing $500 billion, which has...
Notice how, like, corporate power is not part of this conversation. Really notice this. They, in this conversation, is the liberals. It's not the corporate power structure that the Conservatives want you to keep working for. It's the liberals are the problem. So the solution is get rid of the liberals, vote Conservative, even though the Conservatives are going to do the same shit, only worse.
Ballooned the assets of the billionaires, the debts of our children, and the cost of living of the working class.
Just like you will.
Over half of families now say they struggle just to feed themselves.
Yeah.
And more 30-year-olds live in their parents' basements because they can't afford the now typical cost of a home, $800,000.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a small financial elite with access to all that printed money buy up real estate and rent out to a growing class of permanent tenants people who may never be able to afford a home.
See what I'm talking about? I've said this several times on this chat. Pierre Poilievre is one of the most dangerous politicians in Canada because he tells the truth 95% of the time, right? And when you're in an environment where no one's telling the truth, if someone is telling the truth most of the time, people gravitate towards them.
And when people speak up, the powerful clamp down. They silence and slander anyone who dares dissent, including with laws censoring what you see and say online.
I mean, that is bullshit, by the way. This whole, like, Bill C-10 stuff, like, I can't imagine, like, a more dishonest conversation happening. So, like, there you go, right? But that's just commonly thought is true, right? That's just commonly thought is true.
COVID is a political opportunity. The Trudeau government has attacked small businesses, truckers, and other hardworking Canadians.
Look at this. And look where he is. He's, like, in front of this bookcase. Right. Also, he's got like pictures of kids in the background. Right. Look. Oh, and this is a picture of him and his wife. I bet this is actually his office, though. Right. And, so it's kind of nice. And then it's not the dumb piano. It's a beautiful violin. Huh? What have I been saying this whole fucking time? Stop with the dumb tinkling piano. Stop with the dumb like ding 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 stupid ass piano. And Pierre Poilievre is going. I was going like get like drums and get more aggressive. He's going the other way. It's like, no piano, violin. We're refined up in this bitch. Right? What would make this clip perfect is if a black woman came and, like, put a bib on him or something.
They target law-abiding hunters and farmers while letting gangsters and gun smugglers run free. See, here's the problem. Trudeau thinks he's your boss. He's got it backwards. You are the boss. That's why I'm running for Prime Minister. To put you back in charge of your life. Together, we will make Canadians the freest people on earth.
As long as you work for capitalists. Canada will be free to work for capitalists.
With freedom to build a business without red tape or heavy tax. Freedom to keep the fruits of your labor and share them with loved ones.
Keeping the fruits of your labor, of course, is joining the capitalist class, right? It's so you're not keeping the fruits of your labor, you're keeping the fruits of other people's labor, right? That's the goal. Become a business owner, hire other people, extract their wealth. That's the mythical narrative propelled by the capitalist class.
And neighbors. Freedom from the invisible thief of inflation. Freedom to raise your kids with your values. Freedom to make your...
Raise your kids with your values. What do you think that means? Raise your kids with your values.
Your own health and vaccine choices. Freedom to speak without fear and freedom to
speak without fear. Like, he doesn't want Nazis to feel afraid. Like, that's what this is. That's what this is.
Worship God in your own way. See, in a free country, smaller government makes room for bigger citizens.
That's a great line, eh? Smaller government makes room for bigger citizens. As long as you completely deny the structure of the capitalist state, that there's billionaires dominating the labor market, that all of that shit's going on, you can believe this bullshit. Like, this is just myth making, right? Like, he's just making myths. And if you're dumb enough to believe it, you're dumb enough to vote Conservative.
People have room to take responsibility for themselves.
Because in the Conservative ethos, if you're failing, it's because you're not taking responsibility for yourself.
And each other. Neighbors care for neighbors. A job is the best anti-poverty program.
A job is the best anti-poverty program.
And family and community are the best safety net. Now, the people with power, the media, interest groups, corporate giants, government authorities will fight tooth and nail to keep on top. So it won't be easy. But easy street leads to a dead end, and hard roads lead to the best destination.
I love that he's trying to pretend like he's not completely in bed with the corporate power structure. And again, this is what makes Pierre Poilievre the most dangerous of the old Harper era, right? Because Harper never pretended, right? We knew what Harper was. He knew who he was. And he didn't bullshit anyone about it ever. He was just like, of course I'm pro-business. I would like a powerful corporate power structure. Why not? We should absolutely have a power structure, a corporate power structure that is strong, and then all of that will trickle down, right? Like that's Stephen Harper was outright talking that way, right? This guy's not talking that way, right? This guy's outright gonna tell you to your face that I'm here to fight against these corporate power structures who fund me completely and give me all of the power that I need, right? Like, but he's doing the thing that I've been saying conservatives have needed to do if they want to seek power here in Canada, which is that they have to start lying. Doug Ford proved it, right? Like, you, to become the leader of Canada, you have to show the Canadian people that you are an effective liar. That's what Canadians respect. We don't respect truth, honesty, the facts, evidence, any of that. That is not what Canadians respect. Canadians respect effective liars. It's obvious that that's the case, right? That the people who stand in front of you and tell you the truth, right, never get elected. They get chased out. The people who stand in front of you and tell you beautiful sounding lies, those are the people who get elected. Like Doug Ford literally got elected saying, yeah, buck a bear and lower hydro rates, we the people. No, I'm not going to do anything about that basic income thing. No, that's not going to happen at all. Yeah, no, I'm not going to cut anything. No, I'm not cutting any of that stuff. No, not going to do any of that kind of stuff. I promise. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. And then what did he do? Like, and Pierre Poilievre has figured this out. Pierre Poilievre has figured out that what Canadians want, right? Fight me. Tell me I'm wrong. You fucking tell me I'm wrong. What Canadians want is to be lied to persuasively. And I feel like this ties into like the Canadian ethos, right? Like when somebody shoulder checks you here in Canada, we go sorry, right? It's an effective lie. It's a persuasive and effective lie. We're not doing it because we're nice. If you think Canadians are nice, and if you think that that's like the ethos of Canada being nice, right? It's because we've effectively lied to you. Because we're very effective and persuasive liars. That's who Canadians are. And we elect persuasive liars. People like Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau has been one of the most effective and persuasive liars that Canada has ever elected. Right? He outright declared a climate change emergency, right? Saying to us, to our faces, that he cared about the climate change issue while building pipelines, buying pipelines, fighting First Nations people, kicking in their doors, kidnapping them out of their own houses, and increasing productivity. And we want it. We have had more than one opportunity to get rid of this guy, right? But the reality is he's a very effective and persuasive liar, right? Pierre Poilievre is extraordinarily dangerous because he's figured out this dynamic. He's figured out that Canadians want to vote for a liar. That when they're lied to, they go, oh, good. Someone who understands me, a Canadian who lies.
Our destination is a Canada where the government is servant, not master. As Henley might say, you are the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul.
Right, just classic, like far right, like Petersonian bullshit, right? So, this guy has every chance to become the Prime Minister of Canada, for sure. People are tired of Trudeau. Trudeau he doesn't seem to have the energy for it anymore, if he ever did. I'm more or less of the opinion that Trudeau is kind of done. Like, I don't think he really wants to be the Prime Minister anymore. And so, this guy could very easily become the Prime Minister of Canada, and it would be a complete disaster. Like, you're talking about an austerity movement, You're talking about a like the gutting of any social like systems that exist in the first place. What the conservatives will do is they will fund one thing and then use that as their shield as they destroy everything else, right? So they'll like increase disability supports by like 20%. And then that'll be their shield that they'll use to defend the gutting of every other system and the privatization of the healthcare systems, things like that. Anyway. Sweet Jesus, Pooh, that's not honey. You're eating liberal ideology. Resisting fascism through violence makes you fascist too. Yeah, perfect. Okay. I'm gonna go back to the chat here, I promise. I'm like all over the place right now. Oh yeah, I do gotta show this. This is hilarious. On the live stream just a few minutes ago, I bet she didn't expect to find anything who identifies as a white supremacist so readily. Right, here we go.
So nice to see so many faces. I have a question for you. Okay? I need you to help me out. I'm looking for someone. I need to know what a white supremacist looks like. Are you a white supremacist, sir?
Yes, I am a white supremacist.
All right.
Cheers from the crowd.
Oh, okay. All right, well, I'm just confused. And I'm sure you'll see why I'm confused. Because all I can see are freedom-loving Canadians.
Right? She was kind of hoping that she'd be like, hey, who's a white supremacist? And no one would say anything. That's what she was hoping for. Instead, she was like, who's a white supremacist? And a guy was literally like, oh, me, I'm a fucking white supremacist. Yeah, I'm white. And then people in the audience were like, yeah, white supremacy. Yeah. Like, and everyone's cool with it. Like, and everyone's cool with it. Like, I'm done treating this right-wing movement with kids' gloves on this issue. If you are supporting this movement, you are at bare minimum a white supremacist. Right? Bare minimum. Like, it's over. Conversation's done. Right? Like, this is no longer, like, little signs on the side. This is no longer, like, fringe group kind of shit. Right? A dude beside you, when somebody said, I'm a white supremacist, went, yeah! And you stood and looked at him, and then turned back and just joined the movement again. You're in a white supremacist movement. It's time to wake up. It's time to snap out of it. Time to back out. Right? If you're against white supremacy, prove it. Get out of there. All right. Because, I mean, here, from Mushu Ice Cream, we're closing early tonight. It's 6:30 p.m., staying closed over the weekend until February 9th. One of our staff was physically assaulted on their way to work today, blocked by the sidewalk by two men shoved to the ground for wearing a mask. Based on the accounts we've heard from our neighbors, this behavior is not an isolated incident. It's taken the day for us to let us sink in how not okay we are. Please pardon the last-minute change. We're sorry if you braved a trek to support us to find we unexpectedly closed. Special shout-out to our neighbors City Goose and Pizza Nerds for being our designated safety buddy during the current crisis, and to Morning Owl Parkdale for helping us reroute some pickups away from the downtown core. Like, there does come a point where I gotta start asking the question, like, what do you need to see? Here's Pat King, one of their organizers.
In. Trudeau, someone's gonna make you catch a bullet one day. To the rest of this government, someone's gonna fucking do yous in. You sons of bitches.
The only way that, and I'm gonna say it out loud, the only way that this is gonna be solved is with bullets. And yeah, I said it. That's the only way something's gonna happen. A massive revolution on a huge scale.
You might want to change your name to Ishmael, or drop a bunch of change down the stairs and call yourself Chong Ching Ching Chang. Now you want to say, oh, the Indians' culture and everything. The natives' culture is a disgrace. It is, 100%.
Like, what do you need to see? GoFundMe pulls plug on fundraiser for Ottawa Convoy protesters. It looks like GoFundMe is actually trying to find a way to refund or at least get that money put into some kind of charity thing. This event is now a violent protest, right? Like it's gotten obvious. Like this is why the conservative support for it is so troubling, because it is obviously a violent protest. Like it's designed to be that way. The central organizers are saying that they want to do violence. Like, I just don't know what needs to be seen anymore. Like, do they literally need to kick in the parliament door and storm it? Do they need to drive a semi into the side of the building? Like, is this what we need to see at this stage in the game? Yeah, this is all. Oh yeah, I just wanted to show this. Just because I thought it was so, like, well done. It's afraid. Honk it again. Perfect. Perfect. This is a right-wing meme, but I loved it anyway. All right. Let's get back to what you guys are talking about. I had to just clear that shit out, guys. The rest of this is all like one-offs and all this. If I run out of something to talk about, I'd like to know your thoughts on the U.S.-Venezuela conflict. I mean, the U.S. should get the fuck out of there. Their sanction regime. It's the same story as they're doing to Cuba, right? It's the sanction regime that they're putting on Venezuela. That Venezuela hit economic trouble because of its reliance on its oil market, that it hadn't diversified its economy fast enough. And so when oil prices declined, so too did the Venezuelan economy. But then the U.S. basically put their boot on the back of Venezuela and pushed it down to the ground and said, you'll never get back up. And that's what's going on in Venezuela. Like, and it's not very well understood, even though the UN has done like a very thorough investigation on this. And their conclusion about what's going on in Venezuela is the U.S. sanction regime is causing all the problems. That, like, the Venezuelan people can't get access to pretty basic goods because of these sanctions. And the sanctions are completely done on behalf of the, like, Juan Guaido small far-right reactionaries that exist within Venezuela, right? And if it wasn't for the fact that the U.S. was putting these sanctions on Venezuela, that Venezuela would have experienced an economic downturn and then would have come out of it, just like everybody else did. Like, Canada also experienced that downturn, but the reason why it didn't overwhelm and completely take everything over was because we don't have a fucking boot on our back, right? We're able to diversify our economy. We're more agile. We can actually move and do things. I mean, the U.S. has been in decline since 1971. Yeah, the whole world laughed at Jack Ma when he got slapped back to re-education camp. Like, Jack Ma has got to be the one guy in China that is, like, right on the knife's edge. Like, there are definitely people all the way up his ass, for sure. That, like, the relationship between Jack Ma and some of the political class, like, Jack Ma started to get close to, like, the right-hand man of Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping did, like, a full-scale investigation on that relationship, which shows you how committed he is to the anti-corruption stuff. Because in China, they call corruption even having a conversation with these guys. Once Nixon ended the Bretton Woods Agreement that signaled the end of the New Deal, the reassertion of the ruling class again in the U.S. Yeah, I mean, everyone has, like, their point. Like, NAFTA is a big one, right? And it is just like a... Like, that's the sinister part about this, is that it's not just one thing, right? That it's been a series, it's been a steady progression of just, like, tiny little, like, when liberals are talking about incremental reformism, they actually aren't talking about incremental reformism to improve the system for the citizenry. They're talking about incremental reformism to destroy that system and erect a system on behalf of the billionaire class. That's how it's actually gone. It's been a steadily slow, and with both the Republicans and the Democrats, the conservatives and the liberals, working together to enact it, right? Playing their part in the drama. In the West, capital rules. In the East, people rules. So far. It'll be interesting to see, because if it can be maintained, because these kind of socialist communist projects have collapsed in the past. And there are pitfalls. There are pitfalls, for sure there are. So we'll see how it goes. So far, so good, in my view. But should countries execute 5% of their billionaires per year? It's not a quota, it's a performance standard. I'm gonna take that as just a joke, bud, because if we start actually talking that way, that's how this whole thing gets shut down. I hate it when it fucking jumps down like that. That's so annoying. Considering what happened with January 6th demonstrated right-winger doesn't care about keeping the elite into accountability, will defend them. Yes, that's what's going on with our protest. Like, this isn't a protest against the system of capital. This is a protest against the liberals. Like, and Pierre Poilievre just essentially stated it, right? So it's trying to get a section of the working class to fight against another section of the working class. Right? That's what it is. Not certain I'd call the Chinese system communist. Seems like a modernized Stalinism, Maoism with Chinese characteristics. That's a fair thing to say, Watson. What they call it is socialism with Chinese characteristics, right? That they know you can really only call something communist once it's gotten there, right? And they know that. And I really respect that they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics, because the ruling class of China really is trying to avoid a kind of fundamentalism, right? I think that that's really what they're trying to avoid. They don't want to get into a conflict with another nation that is also saying we're going for communism or socialism or any of that kind of stuff, based on fundamentalists, like, well, we did it this way, and if you don't do it that way, then you're not doing socialism correctly. Right? That's kind of indicative of the Western conversation in regards to socialism and communism. And so I really respect that the Chinese are doing everything they can to avoid that conflict. Like, should Afghanistan? Here's a great example. Let's say Afghanistan has another resurgence of communism. That the communists, and there is a communist movement that exists in Afghanistan, and there was a communist period in Afghanistan. And let's say that starts to pick up steam. Let's say that they hold elections and the communists get into power again. And let's say Afghanistan starts doing some stuff that the Chinese didn't do or they're not doing, right? Well, the Chinese don't want to get into conflict with Afghanistan along those lines, right? That's why they say socialism with Chinese characteristics. They're like, this, and they've said straight out, every country is going to come to these things in their own way, on their own terms. And I think because China is so old and it's like an ancient civilization, they have a deeper awareness that just because something is how it is now doesn't mean it will be that way tomorrow. And I think they're very concerned about the passing of the baton, right? That they know that Xi Jinping and the current ruling class will simply die. They know that that's the case. And so they're working as hard as they can to try and pass that baton on. And hopefully what gets passed along the way is if another country starts doing communism in a way that makes you go, well, that's not how we would do it, don't worry about it. Because they are facing the issues in the way that they have to for the realities of what are on the ground. It's really easy for people to get caught in the theoretical abstract space. And I think the Chinese are doing what they can to try and keep it practical, keep it on the ground. What is real, right? And that's always been indicative. That's why Deng was so confusing for everybody, communists and capitalists alike, right? Because the capitalists declared Deng opening up the markets to capitalists the end of communist project, like it was over, right? He's like this great betrayer to the Maoists, like all this kind of stuff. But I look at Deng as very practically minded, very much like, oh, there's these big international markets that we have to we should probably interact with them, right? And how do you interact with them? Well, you open up your markets to capitalist investment. You have to, or don't. Those are your options. And so Deng he made a very practical choice, and it's a testament to the trust that is within the Communist Party, that he was able to do that. And subsequent leadership, Xi Jinping included, have acknowledged the negative aspects of it, which certainly exist, that Deng himself knew existed and knew would occur, acknowledging those while simultaneously moving the project forward in order to ameliorate those negatives and augment the benefits. And that's something you can't do in the West. It's why it's so confusing for Westerners. Westerners are so used to this idea that leadership comes in, starts to do something, new leadership comes in and destroys that and starts again, right? It's just a constant, like, erect something, destroy it, or erect new thing, destroyed. So we're constantly caught in this cycle of reinventing the wheel. That's why we can't get anything done, right? And we're constantly overthrown by capital, right? Even if we manage to get something down the pipe that would actually benefit the populace, capitalism overthrows it constantly, right? So we have just gotten used to the idea that nothing gets done ever. And we've gotten used to the idea that there's antagonizing forces that destroy everybody's initiative. And in China, it's not like that, right? In China, we want to build a project. Okay, build the project. Here comes the new leader. We're building that project. Oh, very good. Can I see your plans? Yes, here's the plans. Oh, very good. I would like to change this one tiny thing. Very well. Plan. And it continues, right? This is how you actually build a civilization and actually get something done, is that you're constantly passing the baton in good faith, adhering to plans as they occur. And even one of the strongest testaments of the Chinese system is that there have been occasions where there's been a plan, and then the guy that came in to take power saw the plan and was like, I don't like this plan. And everybody went, that's the plan, bro. And he was like, okay, like, I don't think so, but okay. And he enacts the plan, right? Like, that's a real testament to the system. American businessmen always get a slap on the wrist. All the heads of the pharmaceuticals should be in jail. Pfizer sells lawsuits for billions of dollars. Jail or justice didn't happen. That's my opinion, right? Like, the fact that you have to give up some of this fake, like, penny dollars, and you never actually go to trial. Like, if I'm the billionaire, my lawyers go, right? I'm paying them to do that, and they'll come back and be like, sir, 10 of your $600 billion is lost to the, like, you just consider that part of doing business, right? Oh, okay. Like, that's how I would act. Like, if I'm Elon Musk going around and one of my lawyers comes up and says, sir, this year you lost $10 billion to lawsuits, I'd be like, okay, great. And that's the extent that I would think about it. Like, I think the dramatization of what happened during the 2008 financial collapse is a bit friendly to the billionaires. I genuinely think most of these guys were just like, oh, the market collapsed? Oh, that's a problem. Well, what are you going to do about it? Lehman Brothers? Okay. Yeah, okay, great. You want to go golfing? Like, really? In the West, capital rules, the East, people rule. There's a dominant communist party in China, but the system is arguably free market socialism. Well, it's difficult. It's difficult to peg what China is doing, right? Because China is not driven by ideology. It has an ideological framework, certainly, but it refuses to deny the practical realities of what's on the ground, right? Like, I've had people come in here and try to condemn Xi Jinping for joining the IMF, and I'm just like, what, are you nuts? Like, of course he should join the IMF. Like, you can condemn the IMF all you like, but it's the system that's in place, and your choice is either work with it or don't, right? And the Chinese are having a lot of success working with these systems. So, and part of that is because the Chinese, like, Americans treat money like it's real, and the Chinese know it's not. And so it means that the Chinese are better at the game, like, by a lot, because they understand that money is not actually a real thing. Like, it's a communicative tool at best, but it's not actually real. Yeah, race is a highly unscientific. Yeah, of course. Like race doesn't actually exist. Like my skin is white and your skin is black. Like that has more to do with like the like the sun and where we were born, right? Like that doesn't have anything to do with like my brain or any of that kind of dumb shit. I'd call it more of a modernized version of Mussolini's corporatism using Marxist rhetoric. Invading countries to plunder the natural resources under the guise of human rights seems like a grift these days. I mean, that's the U.S. across the board, though, right? Like, I mean, China isn't invading anybody. They're going in and getting rail built and doing what they call win-win diplomacy, which seems accurate. Anytime I've listened to any leader, any world leader talk about China, they're pretty happy. They're pretty happy. 65% of enterprise in China is state-owned, and from my analysis, money generally takes the back seat in Chinese politics. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to people in China. I've got friends in China, and I've talked to people in China who are just like, yeah, like, I work, I do my job. Like, if I want to get something, I just go, and they generally tell me if I do it, and it's exactly what Trotsky was talking about when he was talking about the withering away of money, right? That if you create robust social systems where everyone's needs are taken care of and needs are met and all of this, money, you don't need to abolish money. Money just withers away, right? And then people will have like money. People will have like a $5 bill and be like, what's this? Like a kid will be like, what's this? And it's like, oh, that's money. And you're like, well, what's it for? Right? And Trotsky's like literally writing stuff like, yeah, people will use them as bookmarks and like they'll just be around, right? And eventually they'll just be like something we look at as an old system, the way that we look at other old systems, right? It's authoritarian capitalism at worst. People can own things for the benefit of the people. Work or die, it's reminiscent of... Oh, okay. You guys are talking about something different. Authoritarian capitalism would be corporatism, and I would agree with that. It's the end game of the dead-end Stalin-Maoist two-stage theory. It is important. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's irrational to say that... Stalinism does dead-end. And I think I'm more capable of commenting on Stalinism than I am Maoism. And the proof's in the pudding, right? Stalin was never able to pass the baton, right? The system essentially collapsed the moment he dies. And like the big question that the Chinese communists and the Chinese socialists are trying to answer is, how do you pass that baton? Like, that's what really, really matters when you're talking about this kind of stuff. Because capital knows how to pass the baton, right? That the ideology of capital is money for me, right? Which is easy to teach, right? It's easy to convince people that being selfish and money for myself is good, right? So it's an easy ideology that doesn't require a big argument or a big education system or something. Like literally, I have a son. I teach my son that money for you is good. And so that's easy. And then passing the baton from one generation to the next is as easy as just giving them all the money, right? So capitalism does pass the baton, and it knows how to, and it's easy, and it's built in, and everybody understands it. So the big struggle that communist societies are having and socialist societies are having is, how do you pass that baton successfully, and keep the communist theory and keep Marxism going. That's the struggle. That's, in my view, the struggle. Because like all of the gains that the Chinese people have made, all of them could be stripped away. Like we've witnessed it here in America. We've witnessed the stripping away process. We know what it looks like. Like we know that it happens over time, right? That it doesn't just like boom and then there's like a big thing, right? And so they're trying to avoid it. Skippy Polivier, Calgary school coon. Yeah, dude. He's the most dangerous politician in Canada, and especially with how easily he just pushed his chips in to this protest movement. if the production is happening for the sake of profits, then it's corporatism. China produces ostensibly for the needs of its people. Yeah, I mean, the structure of the National People's Congress is what keeps China out of corporatism, right? That the National People's Congress is an elected body where the citizens elect a representative, right? And then the National People's Congress itself is like an educational facility that actually teaches people how to govern, right? It's not like the United States where like I am elected the governor of California and now I am the governor of California. Such a thing would be unheard of in China. That you get elected to the National People's Congress and the National People's Congress is like, okay, you can take over this small village of 2,000 people. Be there for a couple of years, govern that. See, and we're going to talk to you about it. Like we're not just going to be like, okay, cool, you did that. We're actually, it's like a constant job interview between the ruling apparatus and the voters in the idea of, can this person govern, right? Is this person even interested in governing, right? Because a big problem that's happening in the United States is that a bunch of people are getting elected and they don't care to govern. Like, they genuinely think that just doing nothing is governing. And on top of that, like, and this is something that's completely unheard of here in the West. Like, the National People's Congress can just reject people. Like, the people can elect people to the National People's Congress, and the National People's Congress can be like, this person is unfit to rule. Like, if you're answering questions like, yes, racism is good, they're just going to be like, okay. No such apparatus exists in the United States. That if you're elected into office and you're like, yeah, black people should be subservient to white people, then everybody's just like, well, I'm going to vote Democrat next time, I guess. And that's the best. That's it. That's all you can do. So through this system of ascending the ranks within the National People's Congress and then eventually becoming elected, like, and this is like a decades-long process. This is the process that Xi Jinping took, right? Just like constantly ascending the ranks, constantly being given larger and larger and larger responsibilities. Like, it's actually really brilliant in a way that, like, the Chinese system of government essentially says, no, we're not just going to give the nuclear codes to fucking Donald Trump. Like, we're just not going to do that, right? We refuse to have a system where some fucking Yahoo can come in and just take the whole thing over. Like, just doesn't exist. We're going to have a system of education that steadily trains governors, right? That you start small, get bigger, eventually you're taking over like whole things, right? And then eventually you get elected to be the president of the whole thing, right? Over time. And it's stable, right? It's stable. And especially right now under Xi Jinping, if you are caught taking money or interacting monetarily at all with capital, you're out. And that's like the best case scenario for you. Like, the best case scenario for a governor who is shown to be corrupt, and corruption is defined by having any relationship whatsoever to capital, right? The best case scenario for you is that you'll be rejected, right? They have executed people before. Like, it's quite serious in China because they understand what happens if they allow corrupt bureaucrats to continue. Like, they know what it looks like. Take a look at the Soviet Union. And so that's what keeps it away from corporatism, right? Corporatism is the merger of the power structure with capital. That's not what's happening in China. And I think that's what's so confusing for Westerners, because we assume that capital has overwhelmed the power structure. We assume that because that's what's happened to us, right? That is not what's happening in China. It's just not what's happening in China. That China has allowed capital into its society, but it's created a barrier. It's created a wall in its power structure that you cannot encroach upon. You cannot do it, right? And they're moving forward now with a project of trying to eliminate the capitalists and trying to smooth things over. They just recently did like a big comb through their education system. They banned private education outright, just banned it. And they're trying to standardize the education system across the board so that everybody gets a similar education, right? And they want to get rid of the pitfalls of Western education systems, where if you don't get the private education, then you don't get here and you don't go here and all that kind of stuff. They're trying to make it a smoother experience for all parties. Economics has disproved the whole argument that printing money creates inflation, causes inflation. No, printing money does cause inflation. It's just not as bad as they thought it was. And you can ameliorate that inflation by taxing away money elsewhere, right? So if you create $1 million over here and it actually goes into a system that's working, and you tax away $1 million here that's just sitting in the corner doing nothing, you're fine. But we're just not doing that because we're economically illiterate. Can't say I'm surprised they went with the Pierre card right now. Guess his career is in a hurry to go down the toilet. I just think he sees his shot. That's all. I just think he sees his shot. And he's going to take it. Like, he's going to take a shot. Conservative Barack Obama. I mean, he's as black as they'll go, I guess. Ostensibly would be the operative word. The bright lights and stock market of Shanghai and Hong Kong plus a speculative real estate bubble suggests otherwise. But I've heard this narrative before, right? The speculative real estate bubble. Like, it's not going to be the same thing at all. That if the bubble were to pop in China, the general populace would not really notice. Like, it's become a game for the rich. And I mean, that's exactly what's happening here in the West. It's just that we've tied in the housing market into the lived experience of the workers, right? Like, and the general opinion of the Chinese people and the Chinese government is that if the rich people want to do something with their own money and blow themselves up, okay, right? We're not going to just stand by and let them take the workers out with them. And like, just because there's a stock market, and again, like, so there's a stock market, there's real estate speculation, all of that kind of stuff, but that exists independent and outside of the power structure, right? It's not because of the power structure, right? Like, these are important distinctions. That when the 2008 financial collapse happens, it happens because of the power structure and the merger between those two things. Should a speculative real estate bubble pop anywhere in China, well, China's going to be like, okay, well, workers need houses and all this kind of stuff, and we're going to smooth that all out, and we don't care what happens to the rich. Like, there's not going to be a bailout. Maybe that's the best way of putting it, right? In 2008, there were massive bailouts, right? The Chinese government is going to look at these bankers and rich people who lose a bunch of money in a speculative bubble pop, and they'll just be like, and that'll be the end of the conversation. And like, The Economist has been saying this, Business Insider has been saying this, that like, speculative investment in China is very risky. And why is it very risky? Because China will not bail you out. Like, if you push all your chips in on a gamble and it blows up in your face, the Chinese government is going to be like, and? Should we maybe investigate you for corruption? Like, that's the conversation that happens. And how do we know that's true? Because they've executed a bunch of these guys. Like, it only appears similar because of our perception of where government is and how the government interacts, right? It only has sort of that surface appearance of similarity, but it's very, very different. And people struggle with it because we have this sort of purity mindset that if it's not pure communism or socialism, if it's not pure, then it has to be pure. This, right? It can't be like a struggle that is managed. This is the way that I think about it. Like, fire is good, right? Like, we like fire. Fire is necessary. If you're living in a cabin, You light a fire in a fireplace, right? The Chinese principle is very much like, yes, fire is good, but it should be in a fireplace, protected. We have tools to interact with it, to keep a fire going, to warm the house, to cook our food. Fire is good in the fireplace. Here in the West, we've said, fire is good. We should open up the fireplace and let fire out of the fireplace, and then the fire will decide what's good. That's what we're doing, right? And to me, that's why people are so, like, that's the analogy that I use to try to confront this confusion that people are having. Because they're looking at China deal with fire, and they're like, that's bad, because they're standing in a house that's on fire. And they're like, fire is bad, and which is reasonable to say in a house that's on fire, right? But that's not what's going on in China. They're handling their fire because they know how to, and they figured it out. Whereas we just let the fire take over the house, and now we're dealing with the fact that the house is on fire. And so, like, our criticisms of Chinese society in this regard, especially coming out of the West, and I'm like hyper aware of this, the last group of people that should be critiquing Chinese society in a negative way is the West. Like, white Westerners are like the last people who should be talking in any kind of way. Like that's why I try to keep it positive with China, right? I try to take a more positive light, because who the fuck are we? Like, we don't know. Our society is on fire. Like, we're literally burning the place down. And then we look over at China and go, well, those guys have fire in a fireplace, so it's capitalism. It's just not. Like, it's just not. Obama was conservative on everything that mattered, for sure, dude. If the string section doesn't convince you, maybe these books will. Well, and don't get me wrong, like, I believe that he went to institutions and read stuff, right? For sure. Just, nothing that mattered. You're the boss? Oh, thank God, tacos. Can you do something about all this? Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. Yeah, close to 950 subscribers. That happened because of the trucker convoy stuff. I started doing trucker convoy videos, and people really grabbed hold of it. So I want to stop doing the trucker I just. But it's the story. It's the story. Is his middle name Hussein? The income of the average Chinese worker has grown while the country has grown. That hasn't happened in the U.S. yet. Coming up from nothing will do that. Not convinced the Chinese model isn't as exploitive than any other. I mean, the work that the average Chinese citizen does turns into a benefit for them. Like, there are definitely moments in the Chinese narrative, like the sweatshops. Like, let's just be straight, right? The sweatshops. Like, those exist. That's part of it. The Chinese people and the Chinese government were well aware that that was going to be shitty. But it was a different, like, the West inflicts sweatshops on people, right? They basically go to a grinding poverty area, they plop on a sweatshop, and they say, work here or continue grinding in abject total poverty. Right? And then they pay like pennies a day. In China, it was more understood. And there's this whole like made in China movement, right? That like, we take a look at the made in China thing. We're just like, oh, made in China, whatever. But for Chinese citizens, it's a point of major pride for them. And they approached this whole sweatshop thing more like a war effort. That they weren't thrown into it by a callous working class or a callous ruling class that was attempting to extract wealth from them on behalf of capitalist owners, that they were going into it collectively as something more similar to a war effort, where they understood this is our path out of grinding poverty. this is our trajectory out of this horrible situation, and we are all going towards it as if it is a war effort. And they succeeded. That absolutely there is, like, capitalism is an exploitive model, for sure it is, and they know it is, right? But at the same time, we don't really have an appreciation of what real poverty looks like. And also, on top of that, what it has done for their society, going through that process, it means that their next generation of people won't have to. That unlike the capitalist model, which is go through this exploitive system and then have all the wealth extracted and offshored, well, in the Chinese model, it's been go through this exploitive system, right? Some of the money will be extracted and will go to the capitalist class, but the bulk of it will go into the Chinese economy, and on purpose. Like, the state will make sure that happens. Like, the idea that they're, like, and it's fair to be skeptical, but I feel like a lot of how we think about China is colored by what is happening to us, right? And we're going through a process of abandonment, whereas the Chinese government and the Chinese people are going through a process of unification, right? That really is the difference. And so when you are going through a process of unification, you can do things that to us would appear exploitive or shitty or any of this, but the people who are involved in the process have all communicated with one another and have all come to a point where they say this is acceptable. We will make this sacrifice to improve things for ourselves, right? Very much like a war effort, right? Very much like a war effort. And we just don't have that concept any longer. Like, we don't really know what community is anymore, nor do we care to. Yeah, he must be referring to the billionaires, of course. Is it negatively exploitation if the people are benefiting? What do you think, Chinese? I did not say all conservatives were necessarily stupid. I meant to say that all stupid people were necessarily conservative. Brilliant quote. I don't like this, Watson. I don't like that. Like, and I appreciate your commentary. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not a fundamentalist on any of this, and that's what's important to remember, is that, like, I don't actually care to talk about things as Stalinism, Maoist, Dangist, like Xi Jinpingist, Jinpingian. What is that going to be? Is it going to be Pingist? Wow, I bet nobody's thought about that. Like, I find that talking about things in that way, like, breeds fundamentalism, and it breeds mythologies, right? That you create mythological fundamentalism by saying Dangism or Dangist or any of that kind of stuff, right? Like, Dang was a man. And I find this is something that I continuously say about lots of historical figures, like, and it's something that I think we're struggling with here in the West, with our own struggle with the founding fathers, John A. Macdonald here in Canada, but also like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all those guys. We're really struggling right now with the idea that these people were men, that they weren't gods or some kind of superhuman kind of quality, right? We like to believe that leaders of countries are actually deities of sorts, right? We don't actually think about them as if they're just a man or just a person. We really don't. And that leads us towards like a mythological fundamentalism. That if you say of Deng, let's say, because he's the most controversial one, because he's the guy that opened it up, right? If we say of Deng, like, yeah, opening up that market, you know, it was a hardship for his people. They knew it was a hardship for his people, and the Chinese people themselves knew what they were getting into, and it seems like it's panning out for them, especially as they move forward with the plan. Then people are like, oh, you're a Dengist, eh? Well, what do you think about their relationship between Mao and Deng, eh? As if it's like a checkmate move. And I'm just like, well, yeah, it makes sense that Mao would be skeptical of such a thing given the literal war that he fought. And, like, Mao was also a really good leader for his time as well. Like, he was a war leader and really fought against very, very overwhelming odds and really came out the other side, which shows you, like, the power of his conviction. And you start talking that way about Mao, and then suddenly people are like, "Oh, you're a Maoist, eh? Well, what do you think about? What do you think about Mao's criticism of Stalin?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, so like, yeah, Stalin wasn't a perfect leader, and so I just don't get fundamentalist about this, and I think that pisses more leftists off than anything. Like, I think it's actually the right wing and the centrists that when I talk about this stuff, they get really like, "Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Like, oh, so what do you think about?" And I get more interesting questions from those guys. The leftists hate the shit out of me when I start doing this. When I'm just like, yeah, the most passionate among us are the Trotskyists, for sure. That the Trotskyists will die on the battlefield of Trotsky, right? And I'm just like not there. Like Trotsky was a man, an important figure. I think it's a tragedy that he and Stalin were not able to reunify or find a way forward together. I think it's one of the great communist tragedies. I think it weakened the Soviet Union significantly, that the Soviet Union would have been better off with Trotsky in it. But like Stalin and Trotsky were never going to be bros. Like they hated each other right away. Like it was day one, like literally day one, first encounter, they hated each other. They were rivals from the start. And they couldn't find a way to get through it. And I don't think Lenin really cared to try to get them to reunify. Like, at least there's nothing on the record that shows me that Lenin was that interested in trying to unify these two guys, right? And yeah, like, the Trotskyists really, it drives them crazy. I can tell it drives them crazy, man. They, like, go after me because I'm not, like, worshiping their guy. And I'm like, but he's just a guy. Like, he's just a dude who made mistakes, too. Like, clear and obvious mistakes, if you ask me. And boy, howdy. Boy, howdy. So it's the leftists that really go after me. Because I just don't buy into it. I'm just like, Dengist, Maoist, Stalinist, like, they're all just dudes fundamentally struggling with what it is to lead a country based on these Marxian principles. And all of them have been successful to a certain degree. And all of them have made mistakes. Why? Because they're people. Because they're fucking people. And that's what happens. They're not gods. They don't have 20/20 vision. Like they can't like take the meta view and see the string of history. Like they're literally just like looking at one another, being like, "So what do you think?" Okay. What do you think? What do you think? Yeah, you know, I kind of think that moving forward in this way would be really beneficial and all this kind of stuff. And oh, well, you disagree? Oh, okay. Like that's it. That's all they're doing. They're just trying to figure it out, right? And like sometimes they step in it and sometimes they don't. And like when Deng does something that everyone's like, "Ooh, questionable Deng. Whoa, questionable Deng," right? But the people around him are like, "Okay, let's move forward with this. Tough, but let's move forward with it." And then 20 years later, you see, like 20, 30 years later, you see leadership being like, "Okay, Deng did this, and now we're in this phase of it, where the wealth has come in, the capitalists have erected their market, all of this. So now we've got to do this, which was always the plan." Right? Like, and I think it's just a more honest way to talk about what's happening in China. And a more honest way to talk about leadership generally, right? This is why building strong institutions matters. Because people are just people. And if you just let them be people, they'll be people. And that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like you need strong institutions. And I think China is right now showing us all why that's important. to have strong institutional support, right? Like Stalin was never able to build those institutions, right? For one reason or another, he was never able to build those institutions. Well, China has built an institution. It's built the National People's Congress, and it looks strong. It looks stable. It looks like when the institution says it's going to do something, it does it, right? And for lots of people in the world right now, that's good enough, right? Like our institution literally says it's going to do one thing and then does another, or it says it's going to do something and then does nothing, right? Like our institutions are worthless. Like they don't function at all. Whereas the National People's Congress is like, oh, there is a problem. The citizens are saying this. Well, we should do this about it, right? And sometimes this is not the thing. Like it's not like the silver bullet thing, but at least they say they're going to do something and then they do it. Like, and for lots of people, man, it's just like, oh, wow, a group of people saying that they're going to do something and then they do the thing they're going to say. Holy shit. He's handsome look-wise. He's not too much of a downgrade. Deep politics from major hydraulic. That counts a lot, bro. That's Justin Trudeau's like whole thing from start to finish. Are you kidding me? Like I think that half of Justin Trudeau's support, is just like he's my boyfriend. Just he's my politics boyfriend. I really think it's that much. That like I can't think of any other legitimate reason why anyone would even take this guy serious at all. He gives off incel vibes. Pat King, yeah. It's just a meme, bro. Eugenics, but only as a joke, yeah. Who is shocked that reactionary lower elements of the petty bourgeoisie are open bigots? What? Yeah, what a roller coaster. Indigenous people earlier today on stage and stuff like this. Yeah, right? Like, truckers want to go back to running errands for Jeff Bezos. I know, right? Like, that's what kills me so fucking much about that protest, Matthias. Like, they're putting in all this effort and they're putting in all this fight so that they can just keep working for these guys. Like, that's what blows me away the most. That they really are just like, we want to go to Denny's. We want to go to Denny's. Like, it just really is sad how much effort they're putting in to this, like, enormous pursuit. They're spending money. They're going in trucks. They're sacrificing their time. They're threatening the Prime Minister of Canada's life. They're disrupting communities, blockading places so that they can go to work. Like, wow. Like, it's actually quite stunning when you think about it. That, like, in every film or anything I've ever seen where there's some kind of, like, popular uprising, it's people fighting against the actual power structure. These guys are fighting on behalf of the power structure against another section of that same power structure so that they can all go back to work. Like, wow. Like, it would be like if at the end of A Bug's Life, right, half of the bugs stood up and said to the crickets, hey, these other ants don't want us to work as hard. And then the crickets said, vote for us crickets and we'll make sure everybody works extra hard. And those ants went, yay! Credits. Like, I don't... It really does show you, like, what the lesson really is. Because I was just about to say I don't understand it, but I do. It's what happens if you don't have class consciousness if you don't actually have a connection to what class is and who your enemies are, right? These truckers don't know who their enemies are, right? All they know is something's going wrong. And many of them are like, my enemy are non-white people. Like, that's how reduced they are in their thinking of what's going on. Oh, the problem is all these immigrants are coming and taking our jobs. That's definitely a problem. Certainly has nothing to do with the multi-billion-dollar guy extracting wealth from us every single day. Certainly has nothing to do with the fact that I actually generate thousands of dollars of income for the billionaire every day and I get to keep $50 of it. Yep. That has nothing to do with it. The problem is the immigrant. Like, that's where we're at. And we're building class consciousness. Because until class consciousness exists, these guys are still going to be around. Like, being like, let's get back to Denny's. I hate it when it does that. I wish it wouldn't jump down like that. Because then I gotta go up finding my point again. If you've been following Karma Saeed, she's been documenting how weird Christian cultist the trucker protect is. I have not, but... And my background is like the Christian stuff, so like I don't actually need to look too hard into it. Like it's gonna be pretty close to what I think. Like I know who these people are. Like that's why I've always been sympathetic towards this particular protest initially, especially because I know these people. Like, I grew up around these people. Like, I know how they think, I know what they think, I know why they think the way they think. And, like, I'm a bit like, yeah. And, like, the journey from where they are to where they should get to is very difficult. Very difficult. And many of them won't make it. Many of them won't make it. Have a good one, Mark, bud. Thanks for being here, bud. I have seen some reports that currently, because of the Venezuelan government, they are slowly getting better and even able to beat the sanctions. Yeah, there are ways. There are ways, and like part of what's going on, especially with a lot of these South American countries, is that they're starting to connect into the Belt and Road Initiative. China is starting to trade with them, and people are beginning to see that like these sanctions aren't the end of everything now, because the United States isn't the end goal. It isn't the end point anymore. I've been hanging out around Marxist, Leninist, Maoists. They don't seem to like things about modern China. I guess they prefer the path Mao was on. Yeah, I mean, again, like, the last people who should negatively critique what China is doing are white Westerners. Like, oh, here's my final statement towards these types of people, right? Like, well, you kick off a revolution, right? Let's see what you can do. Like, we haven't even begun our revolution. Like, I don't know by what right we think we have to critique the Chinese Communist Party. Like, on what ground do we stand? Like, really? Like, what's your ground? Are you even attempting to organize a revolution? Are you even attempting to organize anything? Are you even attempting? Do you go to protests? Like, what do these people do that gives them the right to say what a country that's actually doing a revolution and continuing the revolution, like, on what ground do they stand that they think that they can do that credibly? Like, it really does smack of just like backseat quarterbacking, like watching Brett Favre fumble a football and going like, oh, he should have. Shut up. Like, shut up. If the best people in the world had it fumbled that football at that point, you would have fucking fumbled that football. Like, I just get kind of exhausted with these like white Anglo-Saxon Westerners who think that they could do communism better while literally doing nothing about the decaying capitalist edifice that they stand in. Like, and sometimes it really does smack of just that white colonial viewpoint that like, those yellow people aren't doing it right. Us whites would do it better. It really does have that kind of smack to it. You know, that like if China was full of white people and like Deng did his thing, people would be like, oh yeah, okay. But like, no, it's non-white people. So, oh, it's not. It does have that kind of smack to it. And I just get exhausted with that. I'm like, bro, like you absolutely could not do this better. Like, and like, good for you for liking Mao, right? Like Mao, absolutely Mao, right? Like absolutely, no one's talking shit about Mao. But the Chinese people and the Chinese ruling structure decided to move forward in a different way. Like, does that make them not communists? In sociology, we say race is a social construct with biological and socioeconomic consequences. Yeah, it is a social construct. That's exactly what it is. Like, it's and it doesn't get more obvious that it's a social construct than the colonial period, right? It's amazing how like the Irish and the Polish went from being like denigrated shithole people to like just being whites, right? Like if that doesn't tell you it's a social contract or a social construct, I don't know what does. Like literally Irish people were not permitted to, like segregation was happening for Irish people. That the Irish weren't allowed to go into places and things like this, right? Until it became politically convenient to create the dynamic between white and black people. And then all of a sudden the Irish were just like normal white people, just like everybody. Yeah, if you've got white skin, you're the same, right? Forget about that whole like Polish, Irish, Italian, like all that dynamic. All of the conflicts that the Europeans brought over, right? That gets washed away because we got to stand up against those blacks, right? Like it's a social contract for sure. Like for sure. And it's like the most reduced thinking. Like that guy has a different skin color than I do, therefore he's different. We should exclude him from the project of prosperity because he's got different skin than we do. No, that makes sense. Totally logical, completely. And now it's getting to be like shooting themselves in the foot. I'm hearing like pretty credible commentators being like, yeah, a big reason why the United States is not enacting a universal healthcare system is because it will also help black people. So they're literally just like, I'm just going to pull out this gun and just shoot off my own pinky toe. Because if I shoot off my own pinky toe, it means someone else will grimace at me. And that makes me feel good. Like America really is just like a big, dumb ape. Just being like, freedom! Freedom! That's really what it is. Yeah, social relations are powerful material forces for sure. Richard Wolff wrote a book that he argues capitalism took trial and error before it was able to create the system that we know today. Yeah, and I think that's fair, right? And I just it's obviously working. Like what China is doing is so obviously working. Like this is the part about the conversation that blows me away, especially the people who feel like they should like negatively critique China. I'm like, but it's so obviously working, right? Like, take a path, like 50 years ago, where was America? Where is America now? 50 years ago, where was China? Where is China now? Like, it's very obvious that it's working, right? Is it the end of history? Is it the last decision that needs to be made? Obviously not. But, like, China's going up, we're going down. It's pretty clear that that's what's going on. So I just don't get why, like, we should get ourselves into a position where the only reason why we're looking at China is to learn. I think that's really where it's coming for me. That, like, sure, you can be skeptical of certain aspects and all of that. That's fine and normal. But your first position should be, what can I learn from this? What can I draw from this? What can we as a people take from this and use to better our own position and our own selves? That's the only reason that we should be talking about China. Because it's so fucking obviously working. Stalin dying, that essentially makes Trotsky's analysis of the dead-end bureaucratic nature of Stalinism correct and vindicates his prediction in The Revolution Betrayed. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong, man. Like, Trotsky was a very smart man. Like, he was a very smart man. And this is why I say that I wish Stalin and Trotsky had have been able to figure it out together, because I think that Trotsky's analysis would have been invaluable, right? That I think that Stalin and Trotsky working together to build a larger project would have made Soviet Union much stronger. But at the end of the day, I just think they were two dudes that hated each other, right? And it's not hard to figure out why. Right? It's not like Stalin was like the bravado-filled man of the people, right? Who was the better politician. He knew how to talk to people better. He knew how to create alliances better. And Trotsky was like the high-minded, meta-minded nerd, right? Like, it isn't difficult to figure out that like Trotsky was aloof, arrogant, not really connected to the needs of the people, not really a man of the people, but well-respected, intelligent, well-written, well-read, and crucially important to the revolution. Right? All of that is true. But Stalin was the man of the people, the better politician, right? Likely the man with better compassion, right? And also the man of action. And people respected Stalin more at the end of the day. And by any account, they couldn't stand each other. By any account. And so, like, it just really does show you, like, pettiness counts, right? That's why I was talking earlier about, like, digging. Like, how sometimes, like, especially young guys, they like to dig in the argument. Well, don't. Like, just don't do that. Because if Stalin and Trotsky had have been able to look at one another and come to terms with their place within the larger ruling body, i.e., let's be really frank about this, Stalin defeats Trotsky, right? He doesn't defeat him illegitimately. This is where the Trotskyists go crazy, right, in my view. They see Trotsky's political defeat as illegitimate. And I'm like, absolutely not. Stalin's the better politician. Stalin wins, right? He becomes the leader. Trotsky doesn't, right? And it's very telling that the Trotskyists can't handle that because Trotsky couldn't handle that, right? And if Trotsky had have been able to come to terms with that, and tried to work with Stalin, and not to take heat off Stalin, if Stalin had been amicable to that, because I think Stalin was more than happy to see Trotsky go, right? But I think if those two men had basically put their cocks aside and actually understood what had happened and tried to genuinely move forward together, it would have made the Soviet Union a lot stronger. A lot stronger. Specifically for what you're talking about here. That Trotsky was a very intelligent man with a very piercing intellect and very astute, right? That sure you can say, like, I think that there was a lot of bias in what he said about Stalin, and that has colored a lot of people's perception of Stalin. Because obviously he hates Stalin, like obviously he does, and that's been from day one, like that's not news. But it doesn't mean that I need to believe him, you know? Like just because he hates Trotsky, just because Trotsky hates Stalin doesn't mean I have to hate Stalin too. All that tells me is that Trotsky hated Stalin. And yeah, and so and everything I just said, I think the Chinese people themselves and the Chinese structure is extremely aware of. And is trying really, really hard to avoid exactly that same thing happening. Because, like, that's a schism, right? And you want to avoid schisms like the fucking plague. Like, you want to avoid... if you are finding yourself in a schism, you must know that you are at one of the weakest moments of your enterprise. Schisms are devastating. They're devastating. It's a real testament to the desire for revolution, the revolutionary movement in the USSR, that this schism did not destroy the whole movement. Right? It could have. It could have. And I am of the opinion that it weakens it a great deal. It weakens it a lot. Like, if Trotsky sticks around and Stalin's willing to tolerate him, I think Trotsky can get Stalin to do a lot of cool shit. Like, I respect Trotsky a great deal. I think better to get rid of all the money. We've talked about this, DM. Come on. The people aren't ready for it. The people aren't ready for it. You can't just get rid of money. This is a Trotskyism, right? That just creates stable systems that make money not really necessary anymore, and it'll just wither away. I mean, philosophically, I agree with you. Philosophically, I agree with you, but the people aren't ready for it. If you suddenly removed money, people wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't be able to handle it. Yeah, the West don't understand the power of capital, and capitalists, yeah, they just assume that if they just abolish the state, then everything will be fine because capitalists will want to protect their own interests. Yeah, right. Like, the capitalists aren't just going to take the shit over directly, right? Oh yeah, we'll just abolish the state, and certainly the capitalists won't get together and erect a council and become a new state. That won't happen. Well, the other thing to consider about the printing of money is that it can't contribute to inflation if the money is not circulating. Inflation is partially determined by the velocity of money flows. That is true. So when printed money is hoarded offshore, it does nothing for anyone anywhere. Yeah, but it does make your currency fairly unstable, doesn't it? Because just because money is inert right now doesn't mean that it will remain that way. And like, in the most stable economy, you just want your money moving. You just want to create a system where it's just always circulating, right? Because you create these dead pools of money like we have, and it just creates instability for exactly the reason that you're talking about. Because you have moments where it's like, okay, the economy seems to be operating in this kind of a way, right? But then the guy that's sitting on the hoard of money can just infuse more money or do something different with his money or do something weird, and it just defluxes everything. My mistake, the article that I was referring to, which I just posted in Discord, talks about rapid growth of economic supply does not cause inflation. Right. Well, most of the central bank funny money out there has been hoovered up by corporations through various stock markets. It has been essentially neutralized. Well, I mean, it's a good way to kill your economy, right? Like, it's one of the few ways that you can actually destroy an economy. Just remove all the money from it. The Simpsons predicted the Trump presidency. I'm waiting for their prediction of Lenin's second coming yet. The harder you work, the better your boss vacation. I heard capital stoner instead of capitalist owner. Hilarious. Hilarious. It's Xi thought. It's not going to end up being Xi thought. Oh, so you're telling me, Eziel, that people are getting the gist of it? I like that. I like that a lot. China had a plan, and they knew they were going to be exploited by the West. The West moved their productivity to China to increase their wealth and left people high and dry, yeah. Well, and really, when you think about it in a big sort of scale way, it's actually genius what the Chinese did, right? Oh, so you're going to decimate your own country and abandon your own people to enrich ours, and then we have the manufacturing base of the world? Okay. Sounds great. Sounds great. From, that kind of civilization-minded way. Like, if I was playing a video game, and the guy that was playing as the Americans said to me, hey, we're going to just eliminate our manufacturing base and let you build everything for us. Is that cool? I'd be like, yeah. This is why I say over and over again, man. China is playing a different game than we're playing. We're over here playing fucking checkers, and these guys are over here playing something else. And it's... And I don't say chess or Go or any of that shit, because it's a game that we don't play. That, we can't just, pull it up and start playing it. They're playing a different fucking game. They do not look at their society the way that we look at our society. And there are major differences that benefit the Chinese, right? Like, they're not dealing with the history of colonization, right? They're not dealing with the racial diversities that exist within the society. They're not dealing with this free, like, literally let the market decide kind of mindset that took over, right? Like, they see themselves as a singular people who are unified and working towards collective objectives. And like, that shift alone, like, they do not view themselves as competing with one another, right? We fucking do. Like, and we've built that antagonism into the structure and the fabric of our society, right? Like we literally believe that if two people fight, that will create innovation. Like, we believe that. Whereas the Chinese are over there being like, no, take those two people and have them work together, and that will create innovation. And we're seeing more and more that is the truth. That, like, it's very much like what I was talking about with Trotsky and Stalin. That, like, so two antagonizing forces blew up off one another and created innovation, which weakened the whole project, right? Whereas if those two guys had just connected in with one another, gotten over their petty bullshit, and decided to work together anyway, it would have definitely made the project stronger. And it's become one of our central ideological, like, ideas, that we should fight amongst one another, and it won't look like crabs in a bucket. It'll somehow lead to a utopia. Xi Jinping thought on socialism and Chinese characteristics for a new era is a set of policies and ideas derived from the writings and speeches of Chinese Communist Party General Secretary Xi Jinping. So is it going to be Jinpingism? Xiism? His name's not good for this. Like, Maoism is easy, Dengism is good, Stalinism, right, Trotskyism. Like, Jinpingism? It sounds like a children's book. Yeah, I don't get it, man. I don't like... yeah, they wear Trotskyists like a badge. You know, I just don't get why Westerners especially are like, Trotsky, the guy that lost. You know, like, that's the thing that kills me the most about the conversation, is it's like, we're going to put our chips into the guy that lost. I'm just like, okay, bud. I think we should probably acknowledge the guys that won, don't you think? Like, we should probably pay attention to the guys that won, too. Don't you think? I just don't get the fundamentalism, I think, is what it comes down to. Like, I don't get the, like, worship, you know? Like, Trotsky was important, but he was just a man, right? I was taught about something interesting about your statement about deification statement, because when you think about history, we have the tendency to deify people all over the place. For example, the Emperor of Rome was called a god over the Roman Empire. Yeah, right? Like, that's 100% part of the thing, right? Like, that's we 100%, like, and this is as recent as someone like Obama, right? Like, Obama's ascension to the White House was literally like, we will cure racism. Like, we really were like, Obama is our healing Jesus. Like, it really had that energy about it. We like to do it. We love it. We just want to do that. It's actually difficult to not. Like, we really want to, as a people. It's just who we are. I am me. Well, good to see you, bud. I like Jinpingistas. Dude, that is so hard to say. Jinpingistas. Like, I gotta get into the back of my throat to say that. Jinpingistas. I like choke on it. This is the problem that we need to solve, guys. This is the problem. Backseat driving / armchair quarterback. Yeah, there's so much of that in the conversation. And there's not a lot of like, okay, this is what he did. This is what he. Let's take a look at his perspective. Let's spend a minute in his shoes. Let's actually think about like, what were his options? Sometimes that's what's interesting about it. It's like, sometimes it really is when you actually get into the shoes of the person making the decision. You're really like, oh, their choice was this incredibly shitty option or this incredibly shitty option, and they chose one of them. And then people will look at it and be like, oh, he chose such a shitty option. And you're like, yeah, like that's all he could do. Like, that's all he could do. I just find this interesting fact about Galileo, Tom, where people refused to look at the start that contradicted the religious worldview. Well, I mean, I think that the whole Galileo situation is a bit overwrought. That, like, people really do treat it as if Galileo stood up and like, oh, I have the truth, and everyone should instantly adopt it instantly, and if you don't instantly adopt this thing that one man is saying is the truth, then you're dumb. And I'm like, I think it's perfectly reasonable to be like, did you? Are you sure? Like, peer review, right? Like, I think it's fair to peer review this shit. And people are like, the Catholic Church locked him up, though. It's like, yeah, they locked him up for being an asshole, right? Like, because he was. Like it. Historical figures are fascinating, right? Like, it, and don't get me wrong, like, fuck the Catholic Church, like, fuck these pedophiles, like, but that's the thing that kills me, is like, stop going after these institutions for like the little kind of nonsense bullshit that is very much like one guy standing up and be like, oh, I've made a discovery, and the institution be like, did you really, or are you just another lunatic, right? We deal with a lot of those, right? Like, stop going after like the Bible or these things on these like small scale things. If you want to go after these institutions, like, stick to the shit, like, stick to the dagger that you've jammed into their fucking throat. Oh, can't help but notice that you're all pedophiles. Yeah, so gonna stop paying any attention to you outside of paying attention to you as a threat. Like, I pay attention to the Catholic Church because I'm very threatened by the Catholic Church, and I think everybody should be threatened by the Catholic Church because they've proven repeatedly that they are pedophiles who are not here for the benefit of anybody, right? I genuinely think that if the Catholic Church actually cared about the needs of anyone, the first thing that they would do is distribute their wealth into the populace and dissolve. And that would be the most helpful thing that I think the capitalist church could do for everybody. Or sorry, I said capitalist church, Catholic Church. Yeah, it's same difference. The trucker protest is U.S. right-wing plan for civil war. Here we go. The intent is to use truckers as intimidation. If you retaliate against them, nothing gets delivered. Yeah, I mean, that's... But, like... I talked about this earlier, but their demands are so stupid. Like, their demands are so stupid. Like, I can't imagine a stupider set of demands. We're protesting because we want to get back to Denny's. We can't get to Denny's right now, and I want to be at Denny's. So we're going to put a big protest together and have a big fight and fight for our freedom and fight for our rights to go to Denny's. Yeah, we're just going to keep working for these capitalists so we can get to Denny's. Like, if I was in the capitalist class, I'd be over the fucking moon about these guys. I would be absolutely giggling. Like, for sure, I'd be like having my champagne with my other people and I'd be bragging about how stupid these people are. Like, they're not standing up against the power structure. They're standing up against the Liberal Party or the Democrats or whoever. And it's just like, if I'm in the capitalist class, I'm just like, amazing. Fuck yeah, let's go. Like, I'll just release a couple articles saying like, yeah, this protest is bad. I'm not in favor of this protest. Because if these guys got everything they wanted, it would mean they would go back to work and get to go to Denny's. Like, it's like the definition of wasted energy. And it's exactly what happens to a culture that has no class consciousness. We're fighting against the liberals, and we're going to vote for these conservatives who will put us back to work, and at least we'll get to go to Denny's. 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 That's how I completely view this. Every time I hear them honking their horns, I'm just like, oh, they're like, Denny's! I want to go to Denny's! Like, that's it. It's like embarrassing for them. Like, when the left holds major protests, it's for things like the survival of the species because of climate change annihilation. It's because black people are being murdered in the streets and cops are beating people up. It's about literal racial segregation, right? Like, these are the issues that when the left takes to the street, they protest about. When the right goes into protest, it's because they want to get to Denny's. Like, big yikes. Big yikes. Oh, my dear Kepler, how I wish that we could have one hearty laugh together. Here at Padua is the principal professor of philosophy, whom I have repeatedly and urgently requested to look at the moon and planets through my glass, which he promiscuously refuses to do. Why are you not here? What shouts of laughter we should have at this glorious folly. And to hear the professor of philosophy at Pisa laboring before the Grand Duke with logical arguments, as if with magical incantations, to charm the new planets out of the sky. I don't know why you wrote that, dude, but I'm glad that you did. It was fun to read that. I suspect the U.S. trucker protest might be another attempt at a fascist coup, of course. There's a history of fascists bungling these things a few times before being successful. Yeah, like Adolf Hitler, for example. He bungled his coup. All right, I'm gonna pound through this, guys, because I really do want to respond to you guys because I'm over time. But I don't know. Is that so bad? Yes, the birthplace of innovation is collaboration. Exactly. This quote from Galileo reminds me of the movie Don't Look Up, and the same anti-science people are the same who refuse to look at his telescope. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you know what, Watson? I think you're onto that, right? Trotsky is the great what if. Like, there's a couple of moments in history that have this kind of pivoting effect where, like, it's easy for us to perceive like an alternate universe where Trotsky actually won, right? And what would that have looked like? What would a Trotskyist Soviet Union looked like? And would Stalin have blown off and been banished in a similar kind of a way? Would it have resulted in that? Like, what would that arrangement look like? Because part of the great tragedy of it, if you ask me, is that, Trotsky is just a much better writer and a much better thinker than Stalin. Like, Stalin's works are good, but they're very, right? Like, when he's writing with a purpose. It's not as intricate, right? Nuanced, perhaps, is maybe a way to say it. Like, go. You can read and listen to Stalin writing about the kulaks, for example, right? Pretty tedious, frankly. Like, pretty tedious. Like, well argued, reasoned, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, he's not wrong, but it's tedious, and I think that he's writing. Like, when Stalin writes, it's for a purpose, right? To show the justification for his desire to move forward in action. Because that's who Stalin was, man. Stalin was the man of action. He was like a katana, right? Ka-chop, kapow! Which isn't to say Trotsky didn't want to take action, but Trotsky was definitely more of a... So on and so forth and on and on. Sounds like the E Plabnista from the old Star Trek. Not familiar with that one offhand. Have a good one, Loaf, bud. I appreciate you too, bud. The truckers are being used as shock troops of the petty bourgeoisie, as the battering ram, yeah, of the big bourgeoisie, yeah. They are giggling while they pay for it. The demands are not important. It's a stunt for American TV. It's about getting the truckers and bikers to protest across America. Canada is just a pawn because you're nice people easily swayed. Wow. If you think we're nice people, then we've successfully tricked you. That's our whole MO. That's our survival tactic, is we trick people into thinking we're nice. That's why we keep voting for very effective and persuasive liars, because we like them. I hadn't thought about it this way, but you're right. You're right. This moment can only embolden future fascist protest throughout America. For sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That this is like a training ground. That this is look what we could do. At January 6th, why didn't we just bring semis? Right? Why didn't we bring heavy duty hardware? Why did we just go there on foot? We could have brought a whole truck full of shit. Right? Yeah, that's a real good point. It's a real good point. And we'll see what happens, especially with the belief throughout America that Trump lost that election. Won that election. That lots of people are feeling like they got robbed, right? And that's going to lead people into really weird and odd places, for sure. And this trucking thing that's happening in Canada, yeah, just do it at the White House. Which, the great irony of all of this, if you ask me, is that they're doing what I'm saying. They're doing what I think they should do, which is surround the halls of power. I think that it should be nonviolent, right? I think the great failing of this movement is that when they move into areas, everyone hates them. They're very alienating, and they don't seem to care that they're alienating, right? They seem, in fact, to revel in the fact that they are alienating. And they're not actually trying to convince anyone that they're actually good or anything. And yeah, exactly. Well, and also I think they just don't have the numbers here in Canada. If they actually attempted to do some kind of coup or something like this, the Ottawa police force alone would be able to handle it. Most people hate and hated fascists. Well, and but they're obviously disruly. They're obviously causing problems for the locals, right? And it's just not a way to build a sustainable movement, if you ask me, right? You should do exactly the opposite. You should, if you're going to move into a community like this, and if you're going to foment a protest movement, your goal should be to be seen as a benefit to the populace. That should be your number one goal. Right? Because if you can't show the people in the community that you are occupying, that you are a benefit to them, then no one's going to believe you when you're saying we need to overthrow the government and become the ruling class. Oh yeah, okay, we see how you treat people. Right? If you can't treat people with basic dignity and respect in a one-to-one, face-to-face kind of manner, then we have no reason to believe you when it comes to actually taking over the halls of power. Right? Or redrawing a constitution, which is actually what I argue for. I don't think taking over the halls of power seems irrelevant to me because they're corrupt. Right? I think that we should redraw our constitution and create a new rule set. And do that through surrounding the halls of power through peaceful protest. And just be done away with it. And that's especially true in America. But it's true of Canada as well. The Canadian system was erected in order to enact the edicts from the Queen. That's the reason our entire system exists, right? It doesn't exist to it doesn't exist to listen to the people. It exists to diffuse power. That's what it exists to do. And in the American system doesn't exist to respond to the needs of the people. The American system exists to keep wealthy people wealthy. That's it. They expect to start this in U.S. next week. Oh, wow. That'll be really spreading. Yeah, I've been seeing that. I've actually been seeing that, the grumbling of it. I do think that that's why, that is why the police and everybody are trying to get this gone, right? They're trying to get this gone because they know it can spread. Like the Occupy movement spread, right? The Occupy movement spread very quickly. Much quicker than this movement, by the way. The Occupy movement was like, the moment the bell was sounded and it was being reported that there was this Occupy movement, there were like Occupy encampments across the fucking North American continent. It happened very quickly, and this is taking its time, and I think it's probably taking its time because it's winter. Right? I find it weird that they chose winter. You know, don't you find it a little odd that they chose this moment to do this? Do you think it's got like a January connection? I don't know. I don't understand exactly why they chose this moment. It does. I guess it does have the other benefit of like the leftists are going to start protesting in May. That's what's going to start happening. Like I think the vaccine hesitancy we've crossed through a little bit, unless there's another, or not the vaccine hesitancy, the COVID hesitancy, unless there's another big COVID scare. I think that the leftists are mainly through it. They're ready to get over the COVID hesitancy. And I think people are kind of looking at it being like, yeah, there's still some pretty serious problems going on here, right? They plan on constant occupation in DC through March. I got to tell you, dude, that's a good strategy. Like, it is a good strategy. I actually think that is the thing to do. And, like, leftists should co-opt it, frankly. Like, leftists should go down there. We should get more leftists than they have far-right people. Like, really. And, like, the scariest thing that could happen for the power structure, and I said this with the Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement. I saw this. It was clear as day to me that the occupiers and the Tea Partiers were starting to talk to one another, right? They started to talk to one another. And remember, at the time, Occupy was like, corporations are the problem. And the Tea Party was like, government is the problem. Well, the occupiers and the Tea Partiers started talking, and they started to realize, and it was just starting, that actually the real problem is the merger of these two forces. So doesn't that mean that while we are saying corporations are the problem and you are saying government is the problem, we are actually agreeing with one another? That we actually are not at odds with one another, but we are actually allies to one another? And once that connection started to happen, that's when the Occupy encampments got cleared. Because that connection cannot happen. And so I actually think that leftists should go down to these. And not go down to these in order to be like, boo, boo, but go down to these to be like, yes, let us surround the halls of power. Let us do away with this system of capital. Right? And like, start spreading the idea that like, oh, hey, why do you want to work for these guys? Like, at all? Like, so you don't want to work for floofy-haired idiot number 1. You'd like to work for floofy-haired idiot number 2. No, I understand that. But, like, there's a... what makes this one interesting is that there isn't, like, a leftist counter to it. Usually that is the case. With Occupy, there was the Tea Party, right? That, like, there usually is, like, when the right is doing something, the left is also doing something. And I think the thing that's killing us right now is COVID hesitancy is really killing us. Because, and I mean, and I'm not saying that to denunciate to denounce anybody, but it's true. Like, leftists are more aware of the public health and safety issue, right? Leftists are more skittish of COVID, and the right isn't, right? So the right's just like, fuck COVID, whatever, truck, honk, right? And the left is like, really? You want to go out now? Like, don't. What are you worried that you might get COVID? Like, and that's part of the conversation. So, What a fucking time to be alive, eh? What a fucking time to be alive. Well, guys, I'm going to close this one down. If you're still here, if you're still listening, like, share, subscribe. If you don't share it, no one sees it, right? YouTube isn't sharing this shit around. They're doing everything to suppress leftist voices, all of that kind of stuff. Same thing with the Patreon, right? If you want to try to make sure that I don't experience homelessness in my life, it would be really wonderful. Even $1 helps, right? That would be really, really great. Always remember, guys, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure that you don't realize it. Because if you do, you might actually think that you're just as valid as they are, instead of just simply being a commodity for them to sell. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.